started.
Do you have another one you can sign in too?
That's the only one that popped. Hang on. No, you call it to order.
Yeah, that's what I
The hotel keeps kicking me off.
Okay, this meeting is called to order. Let's begin the day with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Welcome back, and our apologies that our meeting this morning ran a little late and we're getting started late. Just for the interest of the public and the commissioners, since we have some parts of yesterday's agenda that carried over into today, this is the order we will take today. We will begin with item 14 from yesterday, followed by 15, then 11, 12, 19, 20, and 21. And if you'd like me to repeat that, I can.
I would appreciate repeating it. I got lost when you went back
Oh,
and then forward.
Okay, yes, I'm sorry. Okay, so we're going to begin with item 14, 15, 11, 12, 19, 20, and 21. And then mention to everyone, if you are here and want to speak on any of the items that we just listed, there are these blue sheets over near the door. As you come in, please fill those out. Make sure you get them up here to the front. We'll try to give you that opportunity. We'll have a call to the public at the end of the day as well, but in case you do want to speak on an item, we'll give you that time while we're discussing that particular item. And another little housekeeping, if you'll all make sure that your phones are on, and perhaps the president ought to do that too. Make sure your phones are on vibrate or turned off. That would be great. Oh, I did. Good for me. All right. There are no other questions, Brian?
All right. So good morning, Madam Chairman again, and Director Talbot, members of the Commission. It's my privilege this morning to be able to introduce the West Rollins game warden, Teal Joseph. As many of you recall, the Commission has expressed interest in the past about hearing presentations on some of our interesting law enforcement cases, and Teal is here this morning to do just that. She's going to talk about a case that she worked on recently here in Rollins that she did an exceptional job on, and that it's fairly interesting. So we're glad to have Teal. She's only been in our state here for just a few years. She came from Wisconsin, is what I tell her. And she went to Stevens Point there, and we were lucky enough to be able to hire Teal here just a few years ago. She's worked in Sheridan and Gillette, and then recently moved down as the West Rollins game warden. So with that, I would ask Teal to come on up.
Good morning, President Little, members of the Commission, Director Talbot. As Brian said, I'm going to be presenting a 2015 case that happened just south of Rollins here. So hopefully you guys find it interesting. And I titled this case, The Case of the Rollins Runaround, The Game Warden Always Knocks Twice. So this case began in January 2015. It was kind of my christening to Rollins, and I titled this first portion, The Late Season Shoot 'em Up. That's what I kind of referred to the first portion of this case as from here on out. So what it began with was two men stopping at my game warden station. It was a Saturday afternoon, and they stopped to report some suspicious hunting activity. These guys were dressed in head-to-toe camouflage, so it was obvious they had been hunting as well, and basically they were partaking in a late cow-calf season south of Rollins in Elk Area 108. So these men suspected that several elk hunters were down south of Rollins off of what's called the Bridger Pass Road, and they suspected that there was some hinky business going on. Shooting from the road, they suspected possibly trespassing and transferring of licenses. So the men reported that basically the scene down south of Rawlins was just a roadway littered with gut piles, bullet casings, and men field dressing elk and hurriedly hauling them back to Rawlins. So they agreed to take me to the scene, which was great because I had just moved to Rawlins about a month before and I had no idea where Berger Pass Road was. So that was great that they decided to lead me down there. So this is just a picture of the land status of where this occurred. As you can see, it was private land status. They were pretty close to a state section, but not quite. So these guys took me down there to show me what was occurring. So when I ended up going down there, this is basically what I saw. As you can see, there are several gut piles littered along the road there. There was elk gut piles out in the sagebrush. So it did look like a late season shoot 'em up. So there is a cow-calf season going on down here. So folks could technically have licenses and they could be valid down there. But what I ended up finding from just some field checks was that several of the folks down there hunting had failed to purchase conservation stamps. They were hunting in the wrong area. There were some folks that admitted to hunting wildlife from the roadway. And also there was a big trespass issue. So all these folks down here were hunting on private land, as I showed you in the slide before. But the private landowner had not allowed permission for any of these guys to be hunting. So when I actually showed up, again, this is just kind of a picture of the scene. As you can see, there's several vehicles there. There was more than a dozen folks kind of roaming around the roadway. They were still working on elk, field dressing elk, and also hauling them back to Rawlins. So what I did is I tried to just systematically pull them into the vehicle and just do field checks, try to separate them to see what the extent of what was going on, because I didn't really know besides just these surface violations that I discovered. So just some ordinary field checks resulted in these violations. There was one particular group, though, who was acting pretty suspicious. Again, these are just some scene pictures showing the private land status. Some bullet casings that were found on the roadway. These were able to help me prove that folks were in fact hunting wildlife from the roadway. So again, just a few violations I discovered while I was in the field, but there was one particular group that was acting fairly suspicious. They were still working on a cow elk when I arrived. There was two individuals that were pretty much elbows deep in this elk trying to field dress it and get it out of the field. So I started talking to them in their hunting party. There was 6 or 7 folks in their hunting party that had a couple different vehicles there. Just started talking to the folks in their hunting parties. Things just weren't adding up. It was more of a gut feeling than anything else. There was more to the story. Whether there was another elk that they had already hauled back to Rawlins or what the complete story was, wasn't quite getting all the information there. But I hadn't had a chance to investigate the whole scene yet. So basically what I did is I started sending folks back to Rawlins as I interviewed them. I told them to meet with deputies that I arranged to meet with them at their residences so that we could continue the investigation in the field and I could get all the evidence gathered before I continued any other interviews. So basically, I was just starting to try to put the pieces together while I was in the field as I excused hunters and sent them back to their residences. This particular part of the scene was pretty disturbing. There was lots of off-road vehicle use. They were driving all over the snow, all over the sagebrush country, retrieving elk out of the field. This particular track led beyond this fence. Again, this is on private land. They decided that it would be convenient to cut the fence and drive and continue on to field dress this elk and pull it back closer to the road. So this particular scene, like I said, was pretty disturbing. I wanted to collect as much information as I could for the landowner so that if I could figure out whose tracks these were and who led beyond this fence or who went beyond this fence, that landowner would be able to follow up with them beyond the game and fish violation. So I took some pictures of what was beyond the fence. Basically, it was blood stain. Again, this belonged to an elk. They had dragged the elk closer to the roadway so that they could continue field dressing it. This is what was beyond the fence. And I just documented the scene a little bit more with some pictures of the tire tread. Again, trying to figure out who exactly went beyond this fence so I could follow through with the landowner. If they wanted to follow through with anything additional, they could do so. One of the vehicles out at the scene was this Jeep Cherokee. And this tread was pretty unique, I thought. And it actually ended up matching pretty well with the tire tread, or the tires that were on this Jeep Cherokee that was out there. This Jeep Cherokee belonged to an individual named Robert Caldwell, who is the main suspect in this case. So Robert Caldwell basically said he was out there helping his buddies. He was one of these guys that was, like I said, elbows deep in elk field dressing it when I arrived. He said that, you know, he's not allowed to have firearms for other reasons, and he was just out there helping his buddies field dress elk and move them on the field. So this is where the gut feeling that something strange was going on with Robert. So this tire tread, like I said, matched pretty well with the vehicle that Robert was riding around in out there. He said he was just helping his buddies out. So again, there's a closer picture of the tires that were on that Jeep Cherokee that, again, matched pretty well with the tire tread that was headed back in the snow. So again, like I said, I had sent quite a few of the folks that were out in the field. There was more than a dozen of them out there and just one of me. So I was sending them systematically back to town, again, to meet with deputies. And then I would later meet up with them once I got back to town and was able to investigate the scene. So I'll call them the Wycombe Thomas Caldwell group. This was the group that was pretty suspicious to me. I didn't know if there was a license transfer going on, if someone had just shot an elk without a license, or if they were just innocent of any other violations and hunting in the wrong area. Wycombe and Thomas were hunting on Hunt Area 21 licenses, which used to be valid in Hunt Area 108 years prior, but weren't this particular year. So I followed up with them and just discussed, you know, what was not adding up in the field and why I need clarification, things like that. Issued them some citations for their other violations, but they had their story straight by the time I got to them. It took me about an hour and a half, 2 hours to investigate the scene because there was 8 gut piles in total. I wanted to collect samples from all of those because I only had really 4 hunting groups that were still out there by the time I arrived. So there's still 4 gut piles that were really unaccounted for by the time I got out there. No one was around them. They had already hauled them back to Rawlins. So it took me some time to get back to these guys and discuss with them what was actually happening at the scene. But by the time I got there, they had their story straight. They had practiced it with the deputies. They had their story straight about what had happened out there that day. I asked them about Robert Caldwell because they were involved, this Wycombe and Thomas, they were out there with Robert Caldwell. I asked them about Robert, and they said, well, he was a buddy, and he wasn't allowed to possess a firearm, so he wasn't out there hunting. He was just out there to help them if they were lucky enough to kill an elk. And basically what they said when I brought up the fact that his tires were pretty significantly matched to the tire tread that I saw leading beyond the cut fence, they said, well, he was just helping pull someone out. They got stuck in the snow, which there was pretty deep snow, so that could have happened. They said he was just helping another person out by pulling them out of the snow. This is the same story I got from Caldwell later that night. So they had a story, and they were sticking to it. All of these guys were sticking to it. The funny thing is these guys are lifelong Rawlins residents. They know people from Rawlins. The report came in that these were all 6 county plates that were out on the Bridger Pass Road shooting elk, and yet these guys didn't have any really good description of who else was out there besides their hunting group. They said there was a black truck, a white jacked up Chevy truck, which doesn't really narrow it down in Rawlins. So that made it tough. I knew these guys knew more than what they were letting on to, but they were pretty tight-lipped. So later that night I went to Caldwell's residence to see if maybe I could establish some rapport with him and get more information about what actually happened out in the field. And again, Caldwell was pretty vague with his descriptions. He said he had used his Jeep, he went to the fence, there was someone that had cut the fence to retrieve an elk, they got stuck, so he pulled them out, and then he went beyond the fence to go look at the bloodstain, was his story. So pretty suspicious. But really I didn't have a lot to go on. When I went to visit Caldwell, he wouldn't let me in the house. He was pulling Christmas lights down off the house, which I thought, you know, if you're going to be involved in some illegal activity to be pulling Christmas lights off, kind of strange. He was pretty nonchalant about it. So, you know, that kind of added to my thoughts that maybe he was just an innocent bystander. But anyways, I decided that I didn't have a lot to go on. I had a gut feeling that there was more to the story, but all I really had were the obvious violations that I could find during my field checks. So this is one of those deals where you kind of lose sleep at night because you know there's more to the story, but you just can't solve it in 45 minutes like a TV show. So all it takes is time. A game warden's best ally a lot of times is an ex-wife. So on July 13th, 2015, Brady Frood, our other game warden here in Rawlins at the time, he received a call from Robert Caldwell's ex. And she said, "Did you see what he posted on Facebook?" So this name was still pretty familiar. Like I said, I lost a couple nights sleep over this guy, knowing that there was something else going on that day, but I wasn't able to completely solve what had happened. So she said, you better take a look at his Facebook page. He's posted some pictures with some critters, and I don't know, at least for the elk that he's got a picture of, if he had a license for that. So she was pretty suspicious of some of the pictures that he had on his Facebook page. So I immediately went on to Facebook as soon as I could and pulled up Robert Caldwell's Facebook page. And sure enough, he had posted quite a few pictures of wildlife, trophy pictures I would call them. And Facebook is the ultimate brag board for a lot of guys. And I think he titled the album Wyoming Good Times or something like that. So he's got these pictures of a bunch of dead critters, and I apologize for the picture quality, but they were pulled directly off of Facebook. So my first thing that I had to do was just screenshot these pictures. So I went in with my Facebook page and screenshot all these pictures so that if Robert ended up trying to delete this page or whatever it may be, that I would have something to go ahead and try to get an affidavit or search warrant for Facebook, for his Facebook profile. So these are just some of the pictures that were on his page. There's some individuals posing with elk. Robert is the guy in the white there, the white snow camo. And he's also the guy with the muscle shirt with the badger. So he's got all these pictures, and again, I would call them probably trophy pictures. So he's posed with these wildlife. Again, going back to what his wife said, she said, hey, I was along on that ride when you talked to these guys back on Bridger Pass in January too. And he told me to be quiet, and there's more to the story as to what happened that day too. She said he shot an elk that day. He told me to be quiet. He told other people to be quiet about it. But he did shoot an elk that day back on Bridger Pass when we talked to you on Bridger Pass. So she agrees to an interview at her house. And also, an added benefit is that Caldwell had she had a protection order out on Caldwell at the time. So he wasn't going to be able to come and disturb the interview at all because he wasn't allowed at the residence. So that's perfect. So again, these are kind of the critters I'm interested in at this point. I wanted to see if Caldwell had any licenses. So I just went and did a license inquiry on our game and fish database. And this probably doesn't mean a lot to everyone, but basically what this shows is that Caldwell held some daily fishing licenses. He did hold an elk license back in 2013, but mostly fishing licenses. So he's posed here on Facebook with a bull elk, a 5x5 bull elk, a badger, which he would need a fur-bearing license for, and also that's his Jeep Cherokee again. Okay, it's pulled into the Wyoming Rents here in Rawlins in the garage there, a garage bay, and he's got a mule deer in the back in that same bull elk, that 5x5 elk. So according to his license inquiry, he's got these trophy pictures on Facebook, but he doesn't really have any licenses besides for big game, besides that archery and elk license back in 2013. So kind of strange, but still probably not enough to get a Facebook search warrant. So the first thing that you can do with Facebook is do a preservation request. So I go in and I take screenshots just so I have something to go off of and to be able to show the county attorney. But then the next thing you do is do a preservation request. And basically this is, you can go in as a law enforcement officer and preserve the account. It doesn't send any sort of notification at this point to that individual that you're preserving their account. But if they, are led to think that maybe someone's looking at their account and they want to privatize it so that the public can't see it, or they want to delete it altogether, at this point it's preserved. So if I get a Facebook search warrant a little bit later on, even if it's 30 days later, that account's preserved, and whatever is posted on that account was preserved. So that was the next order of business, is to get the preservation request. And then I started working on basically the probable cause for an affidavit for a search warrant for his Facebook. So that would come a little bit later on, following an interview with his ex. So I felt like I had gotten the runaround from Robert the time before, okay? Again, I felt pretty outnumbered. These guys had a lot of time and a lot more people to kind of get their story straight, which isn't unusual for us as game wardens. Usually we're trying to do all this as one person and do all these interviews. So it's not unusual, but this particular case, I felt like I had gotten the runaround back in January. So this time I wanted to avoid another runaround. So it started off with a visit to Robert's trophy room. Again, he had a protection order. He couldn't be at his residence. So I decided to interview his ex, and when I walk in the house, he does have a trophy room. there's that 5x5 elk. That's on his living room wall. So that 5x5 elk is hanging there. Again, if you didn't shoot that elk, probably a good chance you're not going to hang it on your own wall. But it's there. I just photographed it. And then there's that mule deer that was in the back of his Jeep Cherokee. Again, above his fireplace. He's got a bunch of other whitetails. Those were supposedly from Illinois. Quite a few of them actually did have tags attached to them or near them. So those are probably legal. But the mule deer was, again, hung above the fireplace. So I started interviewing his wife, his ex-wife, and she had quite a bit of information about what happened back in January. Apparently she was along in the Jeep, and she said that Robert cut the fence. Robert drove beyond the fence and shot an elk that was wounded. So apparently she thought that he had actually wounded it by shooting it from the road, and then continued to follow it past the fence and finish it off, basically. So she said he did shoot a cow elk that day. So she had quite a bit of information. She said that he had told everyone around him to stay quiet about it, and they abided. And she also had quite a bit of information about that bull elk, that 5x5 bull elk. Apparently he had taken her son out coyote hunting, and the coyote hunting trip quickly turned to an elk hunting trip when they saw an opportunity in a big elk. He said it's the biggest elk he had ever seen, and he took that opportunity. He couldn't stay away from shooting that elk. So she had quite a bit of information about that. She knew approximately when the elk was killed because she had bought him that snow camouflage that he was pictured with in the Facebook page for Christmas. So she figured it happened about a week after Christmas. And this would have been before I talked to them in January. As far as the mule deer, she didn't really have a lot of information. She knew when it showed up on the wall above the fireplace, but she didn't even see it in the Facebook pictures when she reported the Facebook page to me. So she didn't have a lot of information about the mule deer, unfortunately. The only other thing that he really had in his house that I did end up seizing was some elk meat. So as you can see there, that's just a picture into his freezer, and of course he's got them labeled for me. It says elk steaks. So she said that this was from the cow elk that he harvested in January, and I ended up seizing that, like I said. And she was able to sign a consent form for me to actually just voluntary forfeiture for that other evidence, being that elk head in that mule deer. She also gave me the snow camouflage and a big turkey fryer that he had actually boiled his skulls in to clean them. So took all that stuff from the house. Again, she had quite a bit of information about the two elk, not a lot of information about the mule deer, so we still need to put the pieces together for that. So here is my concern about Robert. Robert had moved to Wyoming in 2012, I believe. He was an Illinois resident before that. He really had no ties to Wyoming, or Rawlins even, besides a semi-decent job at Wyoming Rents. He was living at Wyoming Rents in that garage bay that his Jeep Cherokee was pictured with, or in. And so my concern was that if Robert was on to me, that I was looking at him, or going to be talking to him, or talk to his ex, that he was going to take off for Illinois. Again, he had a protection order. He wasn't able to see his kids. I really thought he was going to take off to Illinois, so that kind of expedited the process. I needed to get that Facebook warrant done, and I needed to get an interview team together quickly so that we could get this interview done and figure out what we needed to do with Robert. So that was my concern, is that he was going to give us the slip and go back to Illinois. So this is when the interview team got put together. I called up some of our folks within the region and swallowed my pride and said, I need help. We need other folks here to try to establish rapport with some of these folks that might know what happened that day back in January, that might have other information about the bull elk, the guys that were pictured in his Facebook post with that bull elk. It's going to be a lot easier for us if we spread out and interview these guys all at once in Rawlins, rather than me hopping from place to place, and them being able to communicate via cell phone or whatever it might be about, she's coming next to you and things like that. So we organized an interview team, and I went over an investigative report that I had begun on Robert Caldwell and his associates. So once they were all briefed, we all spread out across Rawlins to try to do these interviews all at once. And so Jason Hunter, my supervisor, and I went to Wyoming Rents, where Caldwell was bound to be because he lived there and worked there. So he was pretty easy to find. Casey Thomas there, we went to his residence first. We weren't quite sure where he worked in Rawlins. Once we talked to his girlfriend, she directed us to Wyoming Diesel where he worked. And then Brady visited the U-Haul dealership where another individual that we were interested in talking to worked. Again, these were either guys that were pictured in the Facebook posts with the dead elk, or they were folks that I had talked to back in January that might have other information about what happened in January or these other dead critters. So what we started with was an interview with Caldwell. That's where I was with Jason Hunter. And I think it's always kind of interesting to see how folks progress in an interview. Again, Robert had talked to me before. He didn't get any citations issued to him back in January. So I don't think I ruined any rapport with him, whereas like Casey Thomas and Wycombe, they had gotten citations from me. So I wanted other people to go talk to them to, again, see if they could establish some rapport and maybe get a little bit more information than I would have been able to from them. So we started with Caldwell. And basically, the transition for Caldwell was, at first, he was attempting deceit. So he thought he was going to be able to pull the wool over our eyes once again. So he pretty much said, I'm not involved with any critters, anything that you guys think I'm involved with. So we brought up the fact that we had some questions about a 5x5 bull elk, that we had some questions about a buck mule deer, and that we had some questions about what happened for real back in January. And Caldwell, again, like I said, attempted deceit. He didn't think we were going to be able to figure this out. So what he had said, and I don't know how we're going to get that to work. If I just got some audio from the actual interview, and I think it's kind of interesting to see the progression, if we can get it to work. So Caldwell was pretty aware that multiple law enforcement agencies had been through his home in the last several weeks, dealing with his protection order and other things. So I tried to protect our reporting party as best as I could throughout this interview. He was pretty well onto the fact that his ex had probably called, but he was pretty well aware that other law enforcement agencies had been through too, because there was a chance that there were some stolen items in his house and things like that. So basically I went about the route of saying, you know, there's been other law enforcement agencies in here. When they see dead critters on the wall and don't have tags on them or anything like that, they routinely call Game and Fish. So he believed that at that point, but again, he thought that he could kind of get away with just lying to us and saying that he was name dropping. He was saying that a bunch of these heads just belonged to friends. He just had wall space, so he was just keeping them for friends and things like that.
Oh, just clams.
Okay.
No, I simply just needed a place to put them. He didn't have room in the hall. I said, bring them on over. We'll put them on the wall somewhere. I had a lot of wall space at that time, so yeah, throw them up.
So this is Jason just asked him, so what's the story with the deer? Do you know anything about the deer? And he said, somebody called and said that he didn't have enough room. He was going to be moving away, so he just wanted me to throw it up on the wall. So that was his story for the deer. For the cow elk in January, he said, no idea. I was just there to help. I did not kill a cow elk. And for the bull elk, he just said, again, just for a buddy. And he gave us names and phone numbers for folks that we were going to follow up with to see if they had actually killed this bull elk and this buck mule deer.
Don't know if I got a tag last year or not.
But you didn't have
I
it
don't
with
think I did because I didn't even go, in case he said they were going out.
Yep.
I told him, no, I'm just going to stay home. I had a new baby and everything else, so I don't think I did have no license, no.
Okay.
No license, no nothing. I mean, the most illegal person you could get to go out there hunting, that was me.
Okay.
Honestly.
So now he's finally starting to be honest with us. So the first thing he ended up admitting to was the bull elk. So we said, well, we're going to call these folks and talk to them about this bull elk. Is their story going to be the same, that they actually killed this bull elk and they just need some wall space to hang this bull in? And I told him it's not very believable that you're taking these trophy pictures with a bull elk, putting it on Facebook, on your Facebook page, when someone else that's not even in these pictures killed this bull elk. So this is finally when he rolled. That last audio is finally when he rolled on the bull elk and admitted that, you know, honestly, he was probably the most illegal person out there, that he didn't have a license for this bull elk. He was really...
My stories
Sorry, Joe.
That's okay.
seem a little choppy and come off as maybe I am telling you not telling you the truth. There's reason for it, you know, because I mean, I'm sitting here trying to talk to you right now.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
And I can't even, you know, it's hard to even concentrate on that, you know, because this is very, very important. I could get in a lot of trouble over this.
So this was, again, just a realization that his story wasn't adding up, and I apologize that it's not in sync with the PowerPoint necessarily, but he kind of kept going back and forth, attempting deceit. He's realizing his story isn't adding up. He finally confesses to shooting the buck mule deer.
Come off as maybe I am telling you not telling you all.
Technical difficulties. So he did confess to shooting the buck mule deer. Basically, he said, again, this was another coyote hunt turned into a buck mule deer hunt. He rolled on that pretty easily as well, after we started saying that we did, in fact, have some Facebook pictures of him, or of that buck mule deer in the back of his Jeep Cherokee while it was in Wyoming rents. He said that this had happened in January of 2014 or December of 2014. He wasn't quite sure on the date. But it had happened while any mule deer season is closed in the area that he had indicated that he had hunted for mule deer, or that he had shot this mule deer. So that was an issue, of course. He did confess again to shooting the bull elk. He said that, again, like I had said, was a coyote hunt gone bad, or gone into an elk hunt. He attempted deceit again. He really stuck to not confessing about this elk in January, as did the other folks that we were talking to at the same time. This Casey Thomas and Wycombe stuck to their story that they didn't know anything about this elk, that I was suspecting that he had killed, that Caldwell wasn't involved in any elk shooting in January. So they stuck to that for a while. And then finally Casey rolled. Two of the guys that were interviewing Casey got him to roll on this cow elk. And what they did is they sent a text message to Jason. So Jason's phone is ringing or beeping, and he gets really nervous after that because he knows that we're communicating to each other about what is happening in the other interviews, because we were pretty straight with him that, you know, we are interviewing other people besides you, and your stories better line up or there's going to be an issue. So at this point, he's getting very nervous because he sees these text messages going off on Jason's phone. And, you know, it could have been anything. It could have been like, where are we eating lunch today? But he was getting nervous. And what the text message actually said was, Casey said that Robert shot the cow elk. So after that, we didn't even tell him what the text message said. He rolled. And he said that he admitted to shooting a cow elk in January. They had gotten it hauled back to Rollins before I'd even got there. So they were actually on their second and third elk by the time I had gotten there afternoon in January. After that, he decided to voluntarily write a statement for me detailing his wildlife violations that included, again, the buck mule deer, the bull elk, and the cow elk in January. None of these critters were during an open season. He had shot the bull elk in late December of 2014. Again, the season was not open for bulls, and he also admitted to shooting a badger south of Wamsutter without a fur bearer license. He wasn't sure when that happened. He just remembered it happening. He didn't have a lot of details about the badger either. But he did detail all his wildlife violations for me in a very short written statement, but it was enough. So then the question becomes, what do we do with Robert? He's got multiple violations here that he's confessed to, along with the other evidence that we've had at this point through interviews, and I'm pretty sure that he's going to try to run if we let him go with just citations. So this is actually the view from Wyoming Rents, where we were interviewing Caldwell. So that's the jail, the Carbon County Jail. It's right next door, right across the street. So then the question begins, you know, do we walk or drive Robert to jail? So I'm calling on the radio. We call out to the radio what our starting mileage is when we have a person in custody. So I decided to arrest Robert and bring him to jail. And so we call out what our starting mileage is, and then we have to call out what our ending mileage is. Well, it was like not even a tenth of a mile, so I'm sure dispatch was like, what the heck is she doing? So anyways, I brought Robert to jail. We booked him in for several violations, taking an antlered buck deer, taking an antlered elk, and also taking an elk without a license, and that being the cow elk in January. So this is just a summary of the charges, and Caldwell came to court a couple days later, and he pled guilty to all the charges with his defense attorney right there. Wasn't very pleased, I don't think. But he did plead guilty to taking an antlered mule deer without a license and during the close season. The sentencing for that was $5,000 in fines, $4,000 in restitution, which was ordered to be paid to the Game and Fish Fund. He was charged with taking an antlered elk without a license and during the closed season, and again charged $5,000 in fines, $6,000 in restitution to the Game and Fish Fund. And our judge here in Carbon County is a wildlife lover, and she does not take wildlife crime lightly. She actually sentenced him to 60 days in jail as well for taking the antlered elk without a license. For taking the cow elk without a license, he was charged $1,000 in fines, and also ordered to pay $6,000 in restitution to the Game and Fish Fund. So basically a total of $11,000 in fines, $16,000 ordered to pay to the in restitution to the Game and Fish Fund. He spent 60 days in jail. He had a suspension of all his hunting and trapping privileges for 16 years, so he is revoked basically until 2031. And then, unfortunately for him, we seized his, what he lovingly called his fur chaser rifle, his .22-250, which is what he used to harvest all the critters that we charged him with taking illegally. So again, we did seize that .22-250, and that was forfeited to the state. As far as other folks involved, we do have a couple folks that have pending accessory charges. We've got plea agreements on the table right now. We're just waiting for sentencing. So there were some accessory charges involved as well for other folks that received elk meat from some of these illegally taken elk, for some of the guys that helped haul this elk out of the field, the bull elk especially, and also for harboring it in their garage, because he actually did a lot of the field dressing and butchering in the garage for this bull elk. So those accessory charges are still pending. We're waiting on the plea agreement to go through. But again, our judge is very good to us when it comes to wildlife violations here in Carbon County, and she did not take Robert Caldwell's violations very lightly. So with that, I'll take any questions.
I have a quick question for you. Teal, thank you very much for the presentation and all your hard work. So you'd mentioned earlier in the presentation that Mr. Caldwell, that the other people out in the field mentioned that he wasn't supposed to be carrying a firearm. Did you find out that was accurate, and are there additional charges pending in other on that?
President Little, he wasn't allowed to possess a firearm, and it was something that I brought up with both the sheriff's office and the police department. He was housing his firearms at another individual's, at Casey Thomas's house. He was actually housing all his firearms there before he would bring them out in the field. He'd go back and forth, and it wasn't something that they necessarily sounded like they wanted to follow up with. So nothing on that side of things, but they were made aware that there was that issue, of course. And as a probation order too, for both he and an accessory, one of the accessories, the judge said that he wasn't allowed to possess firearms in extension to whatever protection order he had out that had not allowed him to possess firearms to begin with. So that order was basically extended through his probation orders as well.
Commissioner Price.
President Little, Teal, anything came with cutting the fences and going on the private property? Did that follow through with anything?
President Little, Commissioner Price. I relayed that information to the landowner. I don't know if anything civilly happened there. Again, the trespass charges were filed and charged against some of his accessories that I'd contacted out in the field that were out there with him. With him, besides any civil follow-up, with the other charges that we had against him, I didn't think it was necessary to also add on a trespass charge. It would be pretty minimal in any sort of fine and things like that, especially when he's dealing with 60 days in jail and those other fines. So I didn't tack anything on additionally as far as trespass. I don't know if the landowner followed up with that.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
Appreciate it. That was a good presentation.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Very interesting.
All right. So we have item 15, Greg Hyatt.
President Little, Commissioners, Director Talbot, I was asked to give you an update on how things are going with our Ferris and Seminoe Bighorn sheep herd. And that is not my slide.
What we got for you.
Huh, okay. That is not the one I submitted to.
There's a book laying there, The Art of Deception. Is there a reason for that?
If you wouldn't mind.
This is a whole bunch of the slide we've got.
That is the same one, it is. Just checking too.
Art of Deception.
My apologies.
That's a slide we've got.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the one we got.
It would probably work, so.
Seminole one, isn't it?
Ferris-Seminoe Bighorn sheep update for commission.
March.
Thank you. What we're talking about is our Ferris and Seminoe herd just north of Rollins. We first, Game Fish first put bighorn sheep in there in the 1940s. And at that time, some of those were desert bighorn sheep. They did not take. We tried again in the 1950s and 1960s. Both times with very minimal numbers of sheep. Sometimes you could count them on two hands. So we got serious about reintroducing sheep in there in the late 1970s, and we put 100 bighorn sheep on the Seminoes on the east side of Area 17 and 100 sheep on the Ferrises in 1985 on the west side of 17. And the sheep that we put in survived well. We had one ewe that finally died, and we were able to age her as 18 years of age. So they were doing well out there, but they did not reproduce well. The herd basically faded away. As you've heard in several of the presentations yesterday, it's the recruitment of young that makes a difference in what happens with our big game herds. And what we were seeing here was a failure to get the lambs through the summer. We had some people go out, hired some techs to go out and follow these sheep around for 3 years, right around the I think 89 through 91. And what we found out is similar to what they had learned in the encampment herd, is that when these lambs were hitting the ground in the first 2 weeks of June, this low elevation country is already curing out. And so by the times the lambs need a lot of milk, a few weeks later, there is nothing available from their mother to give them. We looked at the forage quality that the ewes were on, and they were actually barely getting enough protein to maintain themselves, much less produce milk for lambs. So what we were seeing on both the Seminoe and Ferris side is that we were getting about 1 lamb a year. And everybody knew it by name because that would be the only lamb you would see on that side. And so the herd slowly faded away. So we started looking at, well, maybe we shouldn't have sheep out here. maybe we can do some habitat treatments and improve this habitat to get some higher quality forage to these ewes. And then the other thing that was introduced is the idea of getting a different source of sheep. Because all the sheep that we had transplanted down, other than the desert bighorns from in the 1940s, came from the Whiskey Mountain sheep herd up above DuBois. And these are migratory sheep. They're used to spending a winter range and summer range in different places, but they're used to summering at 11, 12,000 feet. And lambing out in the first 2 weeks of June makes sense if you're up in the top of the Wind Rivers. It does not make sense if you're around 7,000 or 8,000 foot in the Ferrises and Seminoes. So they had already come up with the idea of bringing in what I call low elevation, non-migratory, early lambing sheep in our Devil's Canyon herd up by Lovell. And they were doing well. So we decided we would try the same type of sheep in the Ferris and Seminoe herd. So we brought in 20 from Paisley, Oregon, at the southern end of Oregon in December 2009. We supplemented that a month later with 12 from our Devil's Canyon herd up by Lovell. And then a year later, another 20 from the John Day River Country on the north end of Oregon. And these sheep typically lamb end of April, first part of May. They're synchronized for a lower elevation. The hope is that they would work for us. Most of the sheep had GPS collars on them. When we got the data back, every different color there is a different sheep. They wandered around. It looked like we had a major loss of some sheep. But if you start tracking individual animals, you find out that most of them explored for about a month, and then they went back to the best habitat they could find, which is the Seminole Mountains, which is exactly where we wanted them to be. So there was some wandering. We've put the sheep into the Ferrises in the 1985. Some of those sheep ended up on Green Mountain. Some of them ended up by Bear Oil. 3 of them ended up in Rollins. Some of them ended up at Will Hill. They wandered considerably. But these sheep that we got from both Oregon and from Devil's Canyon don't seem to have, that explorer gene in them. They don't like to wander a lot. What we find when we look at them after they had had their wandering period is that they settled into fairly small home ranges. This would be one ewe here, another ewe on that side. The one going back and forth was a ram who was trying to take care of ewes on the north side of the mountain as well as ewes on the south side. But they don't really have seasonal migrations. They're in pretty much using their habitat year long. They go up and down the mountain according to what the snow does, but we don't have sheep here that like to go a considerable distance to look for a winter range, which is good. This is what we are hoping to find. We still have 24 collars out on those sheep right now. The supplemental release that we brought in March of 2015, I think we've got 22 collars left working from those. And then we also had 2 collars that we put on the Bennett side in February of last year. So we are able to keep track of these, and these sheep that we brought in March of last year are again doing the same thing, occupying the same habitats that the previous sheep were doing. We had a researcher who was analyzing their data, Justin Clapp. He still works for our department, and one of his conclusions is that when you bring in sheep into totally virgin country, they wander and look, but the supplemental releases, what he saw is that those sheep tended to settle down faster, and they tended to settle where sheep already were. The interesting thing about these sheep that we just brought in March of last year is that they aren't necessarily mixing with the sheep that were already there. If you go out there, you will find a group of sheep, and usually there'll be sheep and no collars on them, or there'll be sheep with almost everybody with collars on them. So they are not mingling group by group, but they just know that this is occupied sheep range, and that's where they're staying. We have had some losses. The first 25 or the first 32 that we brought in, we lost 1 to mountain lion. The last bunch that we brought in, we lost 1 to a mountain lion. That's her collar there. The lion hit her within the first week after she was released. So basically the lion knew the country and she did not. And then in the winter of 2011, we had a lot of snow, and we had one group, about 5 or 6 sheep that got stranded on one ridge, actually a high mountain ridge in the middle of the Seminoes. Too much snow to get out in any direction. A lion and her kitten found them, and she got to eat 2 of those. The game warden at the time in that area was Bill Brinegar, who's now in South Laramie, and Bill set up a trap to try to remove that lion because we could not use harvest since she had a kitten. And fortunately, or however you want to look at it, the winter broke at that time. The sheep were able to leave and get out of that area, and that was the end of the problem. But generally, lion predation has not been a problem out there other than that one instance. We were worried about diseases. All these sheep naturally are tested for just about everything in the world when they're brought in. I think they got tested even more when they brought them in from Oregon, just because it was an interstate transport, so there's a lot more concerns there. We also tested these sheep again in 2011. We captured 25 of these and put collars on them for just in study. So this was just a recapture of sheep that we had studied earlier, and again, got a good clean bill of health of them. When we wanted to bring in the sheep in March of 2015, protocol says that this is a new receiving herd that hasn't been tested for at least 4 years, so you need to do the disease testing again. So we trapped another 13 of them and again got a clean bill of health. So the sheep are healthy and doing well in this range that we've given them. We have hunted it, 1 license per year for the last 3 years. That's 2013 on the left, 14 in the middle, and 15 on the right. The 2013 and 14 are native-born sheep. The 2015 ram, oddly enough, was one of the ones that we brought down from Devil's Canyon in March 2015. So he lived on the Seminoes for, 5 or 6 months and then was harvested. But we do have bigger rams up there. We are recommending that we look at increasing that, and that'll come to your desk, I think, next month. So, but besides just bringing in a different source of sheep, we still wanted to look at improving the habitat, improving the quality of the forage that's available to those sheep. Most of this is Bureau Rec or Bureau BLM land where the sheep are occupying. So the Rollins BLM initiated some prescribed burns. We burned part of it in 2010 and then another part in 2011. And then unfortunately, Mother Nature had her own plans, and we had what I would call a prescribed natural fire in 2011. We had a lightning strike in the Ferrises. The management plan that we'd come up with for that, working jointly with the BLM and the landowners out there, called for a more natural control up there, so that fire was allowed to burn. And it was actually a good burn as far as sheep are concerned, and it burned till the snow put it out, I think, in October. But in 2012, the driest year that we've seen, at least in this part of the state, in 140 some years, we got hit at the end of end of July with a major fire in the Seminoes, and it basically burned and blackened the northeast quarter of the Seminole Mountains. And it was a hot fire. It did a lot of damage. It doesn't do the root regeneration that we would hope to see from spring burns. As soon as the fire crews got done putting that out, literally they did not get to leave. Another strike hit on the Ferrises, and so we lost the eastern quarter of the Ferrises to a wildfire at the same time. The impact on the sheep was pretty severe. Justin was following them at that time, and the sheep whose ranges overlapped the burn in the Seminoes used what they could of their home ranges that wasn't burned, but they did not move out and explore to new places. So a lot of them tried to tough it out in the fire. And as Justin said in his comments to me, for these sheep, the winter of 2012 to 13 started on July 29th. Because after that, they were living off of their fat reserves. Recovery from the fire has been good, though. The 2010 wildfire had moisture right after the BLM burned it, and it was a wonderful fire. These are what these sheep are on, and if I could ever prescribe fires, I want them all to be just like that one. The 2011 prescribed fire, everything went the way it should have, except Mother Nature decided not to give us any moisture afterwards. So its recovery was not as fast, but there still was recovery from both the shrubs and the grasses and the forbs. But then the wildfires in 2012 particularly just blackened everything and cooked it. And they also gave us an awful lot of cheatgrass that we had to deal with. And we had been fairly lucky, or maybe through careful planning, and not had much cheatgrass come up from our prescribed fires in the spring. But those did a lot, and the BLM has spent considerable money and also some of the money from NGOs and habitat funds to do spraying, I think plateau primarily, on the cheatgrass up there. Another thing that we're hoping to do to address the cheatgrass issue is that we didn't think we had a real cheatgrass problem until the spring or the summer of 2015, and everything came up. Production was great, but cheatgrass also showed up in a lot of places that we didn't know we had seeds laying in the ground, and that includes our Morgan Creek unit. And I think Brian Parker gave you, the commission, a presentation in January about our plans to start grazing on that Morgan Creek unit, which has not been grazed for over 50 years. And that will probably have benefits for the sheep. That program isn't directed just towards improving habitat for sheep, but it will have that effect. We lost a couple guzzlers in the wildfire, and the BLM was able to use the federal fire recovery funds to replace those guzzlers. The problem you have with our habitat up here for sheep is that we have wonderful rocks, but all the water's at the bottom. You got Seminoe Reservoir, all the creeks, the Platte River, the Miracle Mile is down at the bottom of the rocks. The radio collars we had on some of those sheep showed that they were going from the top down to Seminoe to get a drink and back up the top 2 times a day. So they're spending a lot of their time just in travel just to get a drink. And so we put in another guzzler on the Bennett Mountains on the top in an old 2007 fire that burned on that side. And we have plans for another guzzler to go in on the Seminoe side, again near the top of the mountain this summer. The big question is, has it worked? We used to get, like I said, 1 or 2 lambs a year, and everybody knew their names because they were the only ones out there. In the driest, worst year we had in 2012, we still had 3 lambs in the Seminoes and I think 2 on the Bennett side. So we were getting much better lamb production than we've been seeing before. We're getting lamb survival. This year, technically our ratio was 79 lambs per 100 ewes, but that seems a little silly to say when you don't have 100 ewes. But we had basically 4 lambs for every 5 ewes out there. We will probably never see production like that again because we won't see moisture like we saw last year again. But that's still just remarkable for a bighorn sheep herd. When I hear what some of the biologists are dealing with in some of the other herds, you know, they would love to have half of what we saw this year. The other thing that has been different, the pictures here, the one on the left I took, I think, in the end of October. The one on the right, Brady Frood, who was the warden at the time, took on the 4th of July, right down by Seminoe Dam. It used to be when I saw lambs out there in the Seminoes with our high mountain elevation sheep that were lambing in June. In November, that is what they looked like. They were small little woolly things in November, and I thought that's what bighorn lambs looked like in November until I got up to Du Bois and got to see what, you know, fall lambs are supposed to look like. And this is what we have now, is that our lambs that are 2/3, 3/4 the size of their mothers. Instead of having itty-bitty little lamb tips on the males, we have several inches. The quality and the health of these animals is vastly improved compared to what we have when we use those high elevation sheep. So with that success, what we'd like to do is expand that success to the other part of the herd unit that will support sheep, move to the west of the Ferrises. Almost anybody who's driven 287 north out of Rollins knows the Ferrises, whether they know the name of it or not, because they see these limestone plates sticking out up there. Very good escape cover for sheep. It wasn't so good before the fires, but now we've got a lot of the trees removed around the base. We do have a good combination of foraging area with escape cover close. The other good thing, though, about the Ferrises that most people probably don't pay attention to is that the east and the west end of the mountains, you've got lower hogback ridges, which get windswept, bared off, gets the snow bared off, and provide winter range for deer. The elk tend to move out of that country, but deer winter in there. The sheep that we had before picked those ridges for their winter range, and we expect that the sheep that we put in the Ferrises will do the same. And if you look at this bottom picture, this line right here, everything to the right is the 2012 wildfire. And so you can see it burned up a lot of foraging areas, not always up to the cliffs in most places, but in some places it did. And then just on the other side of the ridge, beyond this ridge, beyond those trees, is the 2011 burn. So we have two good chunks of large treatments that are now suitable for bighorn sheep. So what we did is we brought in 24 sheep from Devil's Canyon. The previous releases had been in here, right in the Seminoes, and that's our Morgan Creek unit outlined in green. For the Ferrises, we brought them in and released them right here on the east end of the mountains. But we actually had to come in from the Buzzard Road up by Independence Rock and come down here to get to the release site. We were lucky and fortunate that the manager for that part of the Pathfinder Ranch, Keith Burgess, who manages the Buzzard, is a big fan of wildlife and was happy to have sheep come in and actually plowed out the road for us a week ahead of time, so it was melted and dry by the time we got there. And then he came in the morning of the release and plowed out the last snowdrift so we could get in. And just did that because he wanted to see the sheep transplant happen. But it was the same as all the others. Net gun brought in by helicopter to the handling crews. All the tests that you could possibly think of and not want to have done to you, done, and then the sheep loaded up in the trailers. I counted, I think, in my pictures that we had 18 vehicles of well-wishers who were following the two trailers full of sheep that wanted to get up early on a Sunday morning, drive an hour just to the rendezvous point, and then drive another hour to get to the release site for about 30 or 40 seconds of excitement, and then turn around and go back. But they were all thrilled. Nobody was complaining. I do want to mention the sheep are being kicked out right here. This is Miners Canyon on the east end of the Ferrises. And if you look all up here, this is the head of Miners. And that has been burned in the 2012 burn. And that is exactly where we are hoping these sheep will settle in. The south side of that has some of those limestone plates for the escape cover with water immediately adjacent to them that were burned, so the timber has been removed. So that's our hope that that's where they're going to end up. 22 of these sheep have GPS collars on them with satellite uplink. So we get a location twice a day on these sheep, and we get that data every night. So I can just log on to my computer at home and look at them and see how they're doing. This is basically the information that you get. The release site was right here where Miners comes into Sand Creek. The sheep went straight across within a day, found some rock piles off the mountains, and then eventually got brave and went up into the mountains, and lo and behold, they're right there at the headwaters of Miners Canyon, exactly where we want them to be. So far they have stayed there. 19 of them have stayed there. You notice these two little dots running off to the east, that's two ewes that apparently decided to go on walkabout. They stopped at a rock pile off the picture about there and have been exploring a mile or so north, east, south, and west of that rock pile. So they're not happy where they are, but they're not brave enough to go someplace else. And the question is going to be, once the snow is gone and vegetation starts greening up, where are those two girls going to end up? But they are actually closer to the Seminoe sheep now than they are the sheep that we brought down and released in Ferrises. We've had no mortality other than the one that occurred during the trapping and transplanting. There was one ewe in the trailer that could not get up. We took her back to Lander, and she was giving an IV and all the treatment you would expect of an emergency room, and checked again the next morning, and she was still not able to get up, so she was put down. I talked to Dr. Wood yesterday, and they had necropsied her, and she did have what they call capture myopathy, basically enough stress during the capture and handling that she ruptured some of her major body muscles and was suffering from that, and so she could not have recovered. So we had one loss there. We had a capture myopathy in the first release from Oregon, and we had one that died during the trapping operation in Oregon. So out of the 101 sheep that 102 that we've hauled in, 101, we've lost 3 sheep. We've also did the recapture of 25 sheep for the telemetry study, and we did a recapture of 13 sheep for the disease work in 2015 with no losses. So overall, we're looking at about 2% loss of the sheep through the handling and trapping. Generally, at least what I've been told, is if you can keep your losses below 5%, you're doing really well, and you start worrying if you get above 10 or 15. So we're very happy with how well these trapping operations and handling operations have worked. So before I take questions, I didn't have a slide for it, but I should have. I just wanted to let you know what our future plans were. We still have plans for doing some more prescribed fires in the Seminoes. There's some of the stuff in the upper reaches of the Morgan Creek unit that has not yet been touched, and the BLM would like to get on that fairly soon, because the wildfire and the prescribed fires give us very good fire breaks to keep the fire from getting away from them. And the long-term plan for the Ferris is, whether we have success with our sheep or not, is to continue the fires that were done on the east end, even though Mother Nature did them, but to continue that on over towards the west end and get that mountain back into a more natural fire cycle and get some recovery of some of the important vegetation that we're concerned about. If these sheep do well on Ferris, and so far, yesterday morning when I checked at them, they were still all live, and they are still all where they're supposed to be, except for the 2 walkabouts. We may be asking for more releases or transplants if they're available from Devil's Canyon to move into other parts of the Ferrises, but right now things are going well for our herd.
Thank you, Greg. Hey, I just a comment and 2 questions. So, first of all, I hope you're really wrong about that rain, and we see another good year like that. And was this location historically? Did it historically have a population of sheep, or is this just a new population that we're trying to create?
Madam President, this actually did have sheep in it before. The Tom Sun diaries from the 1870s mentioned that he had hunted a ram at Willow Hill north of Rollins, and then he mentioned seeing sheep. It would have been probably in Sand Creek Canyon. So yeah, they were here even in the 1800s. They were just lost along with all the rest of the low elevation sheep as the Europeans expanded into the state.
And I'm sure this is exactly what your plan is, but are you able to get, since you're going to expand the grazing to kind of control the cheatgrass, are you able to get livestock up there before that cheatgrass goes to seed?
Madam President, that's going to be the trick. Our plans call for late May, early June grazing. The ranch that is working with us, fortunately, is right next door. Their cattle are immediately south of the unit, and they would normally take them to a place that's immediately west of the unit. So all we're going to do is have them trail slowly through our unit to get to their normal summer range, instead of going up through their own ranch as they normally would. So depending on snow melt, yes. Most years we should be able to. I don't know if Brian mentioned it, but our plan is to try this for 3 years and then sit back and see, did it work? So.
Thank you very much. Any other questions? Commissioner Price, do you have?
You're planning on additional transplants into this area, or you have a self-sustaining operation now?
President Little and Commissioner Price, we don't specifically have plans for them. If we could get this herd on the Ferris doing as well as the Seminoe herd without any more sheep, we will. I think the recovery or the restoration of the herd would be faster if we had more supplements, but that's not going to be my decision. When they asked if there was anybody who had room for the surplus sheep that were going to be available in Devil's Canyon, my hand was the first hand up in the room, but we don't have any commitments to either make that request or for them to provide sheep.
And a follow-up question, this is curiosity. What type of negotiation do you have to do with Oregon to get these? I mean, if they give you 100 sheep, they're taking away 100 sheep away from their population that could be you know, going to their hunters, you know, maybe not to use and stuff, but they're, could you give me a quick summary of what that might be?
President Little, Commissioner Price, probably not,
Oh,
because that's not done at my level. I show up with the truck and help them trap sheep, and I drive them back. That's the gist of my participation. That is handled at higher levels and quite often at commission level. I know some of the earlier transplants that were done, I think we traded turkeys, as I recall, for some bighorn sheep with, I think, maybe Montana. So that is done at a higher level than me.
So we have to go to a higher level. Thank you, I appreciate that, it's interesting.
Thank you very much, Greg. Really appreciate the presentation. Steve Kilpatrick, I believe you wanted to have a brief comments on this from the Wyoming Wild Sheep Foundation.
So, Chairman Little, members of the commission, Director Talbot, Steve Kilpatrick with the Wyoming Wild Sheep, and just wanted to express our hats off to the Game and Fish folks and the commission for supporting keeping sheep on the mountain and getting them, keeping them in the state. As you know, the history of sheep, and as kind of alluding to your question, President Little, the distribution was quite expansive in Wyoming. Now we're down to about 10 to 20% of what sheep used to occupy in the state. So there used to be 2.5 million sheep scattered across the West. For the 1950s and 60s, it's down to about 25,000, and now it's built up to about 85,000. So we're doing pretty well. And there is a lot of energy, and you guys are tapping it, and money associated with bighorn sheep. I got to go to Reno, and first off, game and fish biologist Doug McWhorter was honored. His name was put on the Biologist Hall of Fame, and that's for all of the U.S. At the National Wild Sheep Convention, if you will. That was started in 2006. So him and Ryan Amundsen have been main liaisons between us and the Game and Fish, and done an awesome job. And that's illustrated by Doug receiving a huge award. And the Reno event's big if you haven't been there. About 10,000 people attended the last banquet. They had about 1,500 people in attendance. The Game and Fish, or the commissioners, take that back, the governor's sheep tag brought 75,000, but a desert sheep tag brought 380,000 at that convention. So they brought in about $8.5 million to spend on sheep. We get to tap into some of that through our association too. We've actually, in Wyoming, got to put about $1 million on the ground, and that's a lot of that is thanks to our membership, of course, and some of you commissioners have been very gracious and given us tags to generate revenue off of, and we help with a lot of things that Greg just talked about. If you go to our website, we got all of our projects that we've invested in since, I believe, 1988 listed. So, and again, we're about $1 million out of our pocket onto the ground. I guess we just encourage you to keep doing what you're doing. I look at, as a former biologist, that sheep as being a kind of a indicator species. If we can keep sheep there, we can keep a lot of species there. And they're pretty darn sensitive, and they kind of like to tip over pretty easy. So if we can keep good, healthy sheep populations, you're doing a lot of good for a whole plethora of wildlife species. And then the board just asked to remind you, our event is June 4th in Casper. Please come to it if you'd like to. And then we have the summit on June 16th and 17th on top of the Bighorns, where we get into the weeds about sheep. Thanks again. Oh, one other thing, mentioned hauling sheep around. Daryl Lutz has contacted me, and we took a look at the U-Haul trailer, and it's EWE for you, and it was I think, you guys acquired it out of where did it come from? Sparks or someplace, I think, before. One other chapter gave it to you guys years ago. It's rusted out, so we're going to get you a new trailer so you can keep hauling sheep. So,
Thank you.
and I'll stand for any questions, but thanks for the time, and thanks for what you do in the conservation of bighorn sheep.
Well, Steve, thank you for the speech and the trailer. All right, thanks very much. Moving on, Rennie, you are finally up regarding the super tag.
Thank you, President. Great to be here. Commission wanted to give you right now some information about our Super Tag raffle program and just an update on that program, how it's going. where we think it may go in the future. And just to let you know, too, if that there are options for you to consider if you ever want to make any changes or you'd like proposals on any potential changes to this raffle program. It was created in 2013 by the governor and the legislature, and what that enacting legislation said is that the commission could raffle 2 licenses for each of Wyoming's big game and trophy game species. So starting in 2014, that raffle started. We have a raffle for 9 species right now. Gray wolf and grizzly bears are not in the raffle. And additionally, we also have a program called the Trifecta, and that is a neat option. And that is the winner of the Trifecta gets to choose any 3 of those licenses to hunt in that year. So that's how it's set up and run right now. Raffle tickets are $10 for a specific species raffle ticket, or $30 for the Trifecta. So right now, 12 of the 20 potential, or 22 if grizzly bears were ever to come off the endangered species list and you authorize hunting of them. So right now we do 12 of those tags through this raffle program, and it's very exciting. There's a few other details in there. Can answer any questions that you have about the specifics of that law, how it's applied, but that's how it's run right now. And right now, in terms of the first 2 years, we have 2 years of data, and we're partway through year 3 on this. In 2014, we sold over 49,000 tickets and brought in $661,000 worth of revenue for the commission and for wildlife management. And in 2015, increased the number of tickets sold to 50,485 and brought in $641,000 worth of revenue for wildlife management in Wyoming. So neat program. It's still remaining popular. We saw a 1% increase in ticket sales there from 14 to 15, slight decrease in revenue, but it was around 3% decrease. And Wyoming is not the only western state or only state to have a raffle program. Most of the western states see about a 15 to 20% decline from the first year to subsequent years. There's usually some interest, some real early interest in the program, and then it drops off. And each program is run differently. Arizona, for example, you can hunt year-round if you're the raffle winner. So lots of different options out there. States do it differently, but we're bringing in more money than Arizona with even that added bonus if you're the winner down there. Still bringing in more money than Montana. So it's very popular. Most popular tickets to raffles are the sheep, and then moose, and then elk. The Trifecta, we're seeing a little decrease in interest there, and that's an area where you could change that up, or we could bring you a proposal. But as we'll see here in a little bit, the Trifecta is an amazing experience if you are the winner. We've had 2 winners, and both winners have filled all 3 of their tags and had just some amazing experiences hunting in Wyoming. So it's one of the most unique opportunities I think you can have in the West, or just a hunt period in North America, is if you win this Trifecta tag. And so it's still I think a very popular program, but it is where we're seeing some decrease. Up here on the screen, just showing you how ticket sales go by month with residents and non-residents. So we are going to see likely our biggest months of sales ahead of us. We are tracking ahead right now in 16 compared to 15. So this obviously has given us the opportunity to do some marketing, spending about 3% of 4% on marketing in terms of what we're bringing in. Those of you in business would know that's a pretty low number. But we're trying some different strategies, trying it out. It's something we believe with your setting this program up, the legislature creating it with the idea that we should try to bring in more revenue with how popular hunting in Wyoming is. We felt like that we should try to maximize this, and so really trying to throw some this message out there that people can enter this raffle and have a great experience in Wyoming. We're calling it the ultimate Western hunting adventure. And we're really trying to target two audiences of people who are big game hunters. So in those big game hunting magazines around the country, especially people who have some interest in traveling west. And obviously we want our residents too to be entering this and buying these licenses too. So have some local marketing efforts that we run as well on this program. But so far things are going pretty well with this. We've got some neat stories to tell as well. This year, we were able to tell the story of the 2015 goat winner. Recorded the second largest goat in the history of Wyoming. And he spent, I think, about 30 days out hunting, but just had an incredible experience. We've got that story that he told about his experience. If any of you are interested of it, it's on our website as well. And so we're trying to let people know about how amazing this experience is if you can win this raffle. Additionally, we get some interest from some of the private sector folks who contact our winners and offer them sponsorships, offer to guide them, offer to film it. The trifecta winner in 15 had all three of his hunts filmed, and that will be broadcast on national TV at some point, his story. And he had another incredible experience, and I believe his goat was an honorable mention. He just had a wild time. He did almost die in the backcountry from a big laceration on his thigh, but he still wanted to keep going sheep hunting that day. But the guides took him out to the hospital. But anyway, we'll see a little bit about his story here at the end. We're trying to innovate a little bit, try some different things. We've tested some different messages to see what people are interested, what drives sales. So we're trying on this as best we can. We're shooting to continue to increase sales and revenue from this program. So that's our goal for 2016. Rebecca is leading a lot of our social media on this and can be very strategic with who sees the ads, where they go with that to try to make sure we get people who are interested in buying tags and see if we're effective with those tags, and we can measure it thanks to social media and also our email and our website. Here's some pictures from this last year. There's the goat there in the top left is the second largest in the history of Wyoming. The trifecta winner, Ben Jackson, is an attorney from Cheyenne. That's him in the top right corner. And actually our bison there on the right side was from 2014, and that bison is also a record for archery and is in the Pope and Young record books there. Moose hunter, elk hunter, all had great experiences in antelope there too. So it's these folks are having incredible experiences. We're just trying to make sure other people hear those stories of what they have. So hopefully we'll continue to draw interest in the sales of these tickets. Just a couple of things for you to think about. We have looked at this program now that we're in our third year to consider if there's anything that could make it run a little bit more smoothly, if there's any changes that we could try. Right now, a winner does have to purchase their licenses, so it creates a little bit of confusion as we go out and market this. As if you're the raffle winner, you get to buy a license, and that means people have not really been too upset about that, and that's something we'd have to have the legislature change. But it's one thing that would change the wording of our marketing a little bit. We don't have to put that caveat out there for folks. So we'll just keep looking at that and see if that's something that we should just bring to the legislature and make sure they're aware of it. But there are also some things you could look at.
So a little glitch is that if they win the trifecta or any of these licenses, super tag, they still have to buy the license, which is fine. But does this present a problem?
President Little. So far it has not, but we're and in the end we're saying it there. The small print is there for people to see, so they should recognize it. But it would just be a maximum loss of revenue would be about $17,000 if the price of the license was included, and we're talking about a non-resident then winning a lot of these. So, you know, it wouldn't cost us that much money to make that change, and it would create a little less confusion, but it hasn't created a problem yet. We haven't had anybody get too upset about that.
I guess, I think that's fair enough. You know, I could see a little problem if a local, say a Wyoming resident won the tag and stuff, he may have to put out, what, $600 or something like that. Most of these non-residents are high-priced hunters, and it probably presents, I think, very little, if no problem, to them on that.
President Little. Our first winner of the trifecta was a non-resident from Oklahoma, and I believe he was worked in a shop out of Oklahoma, was a welder. So he did have to come in and spend $7,000, I believe, for all his tags. He was glad to do it. He had a great time. He did not get guided. So if you then need to be outfitted, that creates another cost for you. So it's just a consideration. And I don't know if the legislature will ever want to take that on, but it is just one of those things.
We also need to consider what it might cost us in license sales, because it is there on the website that this is giving you the right to purchase those. And when you go to that website, there's people, I would imagine, that don't purchase raffle tickets because of that. So
That's
Do you have more to your presentation? I actually have a couple of questions, but I don't want to cut in.
I did have a couple more, just one more point to make,
Go ahead.
and then I wanted to show you a video that Ray Hageman, our videographer, made of the trifecta winner this year. So you know, the other situation is that there are those other tags. We could restructure that trifecta in the future. If you ever want proposals on this, we'll keep evaluating and keep bringing you ideas. If there's anything in terms of the timing of the raffle you want to consider, that's always out there too. So there are just a few things that the commission has the authority over. The price of the tickets as well is something that you have the authority over. So you know, we could look at something like that if you ever wanted to test whether bringing the price down would be down, or doubling it, or whatever it may be. You could we could be nimble on that front. And then we'll bring up the video here for you to show you the story of Ben Jackson. Again, he's an attorney, Cheyenne resident. That's neat. I believe he may have moved to Laramie and this year in the middle of his hunt, but he spent about 30 days doing his various hunts and had a pretty incredible time.
You'd be hard-pressed to find a hunter in Wyoming who had a better year in 2015 than Laramie resident Ben Jackson, who harvested a bighorn sheep, mountain goat, and moose in 1 year. While most hunters spend a lot of years accumulating preference points to hunt once-in-a-lifetime species like mountain goat, or bighorn sheep, which is usually a once-in-a-lifetime draw, Jackson bypassed the process completely, winning the 2015 Super Tag Trifecta offered by the Wyoming Game and Fish Department.
It's hard to put it into words what kind of experience this was for me. You know, you hear once in a lifetime all the time. People refer to, oh, this was once in a lifetime, that was once in a lifetime. But this is truly once in a lifetime. And what that meant to me is I grew up in Wyoming, and these tags took me to places that I've never been before in the state, and probably had no reason to go to, and may never go to again. But the people I met along the way and the experience I had, it's just hard to categorize what that means to someone.
The Game and Fish's Super Tag and Super Tag Trifecta raffle, approved by the Wyoming legislature in 2013 as a way to generate additional revenues for wildlife conservation, provides hunters, if they win, to buy licenses for any of Wyoming's 9 big game and trophy species in any area they want, without worry about using up preference points, beating the drawing odds, and mandatory waiting periods are waived. Jackson says hunting his 3 choices had its challenges, but was well worth it.
You know, just the ability to be from Wyoming, to get those tags, and to do it all in one season is a tremendous thing that made it once in a lifetime. An extreme hunt that was an extreme pleasure.
The big appeal of Super Tags is that successful raffle winners who have preference points keep them, and mandatory waiting periods are waived. So, should they draw a coveted tag that requires a waiting period before they can apply again, doesn't matter. Hunters can enter the draw the very next year. And hunters can still draw licenses through the regular drawing process, which means one real lucky hunter could conceivably go hunting for, say, 2 bighorn sheep in a year. Or do like Ben Jackson did, draw and fill an antelope buck license and general deer license. Super tags are $10 each, and trifecta tickets are $30. There are a few limitations relating to moose and bighorn sheep, so be sure to check the Wyoming Game and Fish website for any questions you might have. This is Ray Hageman with the Wyoming Game and Fish Department.
Thank you, Randy. So just for my own knowledge, at one place in here you had, in 2015, the median age of individuals who purchased raffle tickets was 48.5, and buyers' ages ranged from, I finally figured it out on my own, never mind. You don't know how many times I reread that thing. That's nuts. I was just wondering also, when I read all the ideas in here regarding, how to do this, is there any way that someone who's actually just applying, for the draw on, let's say, elk, whatever, any type of draw, could they make would it be possible for them to make a choice that, like say if it might be somebody who wasn't going to buy a raffle ticket, I mean, you don't know that, but they know that. Could they choose that if they don't make the draw, that they leave $30 in there for the trifecta? Would that be possible to do within the system?
President, great question. What we have tried to do is make it really easy once you're going through your purchase to buy a super tag at the end of that, so people know about it. And then we also make sure people who are unsuccessful, that we let them know this and other ways that they can maybe have an opportunity to hunt in Wyoming that year if they're unsuccessful in a particular draw. In terms of that, the logistics of that's something we could definitely consider and look at. I think Gene and our IT people could consider it.
Yeah, I don't know, but people might. I mean, they might say to themselves, okay, I put in my $100 for this tag, and that's great. That's my investment for the year. But okay, well, I didn't get chosen in the draw, and when that's reimbursed to me, I guess I could just, I'm good with $70 back, and I'll put 30 towards a chance at the trifecta. And I just didn't. I'm not IT or savvy enough, or I guess I should say software savvy enough to know that whether you could figure that out. I suppose there's a way. Okay, those were mine.
Thank you, President. We also wanted to say thanks to the Commission, made the change earlier this year that we can now start selling the raffle tickets all year round. The draw, we close sales on July 1st, and then have the draw announced before July 15th. Director Talbot gets to call those winners, and he gets some pretty fun phone calls those days. But so he, on the 15th, will open sales back up for next year, this year, so we get that many more months of sales going forward, so appreciate that change.
Any other questions?
I'm just going to ask another kind of curiosity question. I looked at your marketing stuff and the different places where you do market in. Does Cabela's do you ever contact them or do anything with them, because they have that tag program?
President, we have looked at a lot of options, but I don't know specifically if we've looked at something with Cabela's or Bass Pro or Sportsman's. Rocky Mountain here from Casper, a lot of those folks are great partners, and that's why we have looked for a lot of those, because their marketing efforts can enhance this, so those partnerships really do help sales. So I'll check on that when we get back and consider it going forward.
You see it in their magazine, they have what they call a tags program, and you can buy the best tag anywhere type of a thing. I don't know exactly, I've never tried to do anything with it, but I was just curious because they've got quite a circulation.
If there are no other questions, Randy, you are going to give us a legislative update as well.
I'll just stay here. Thank you, President. Just a couple of quick things on the session. Obviously was a budget session. That budget starts July 1st of this year and ends on June 30th of 2018. So that's the budget that was just passed as part of this. John Kennett will be up to talk about the how that budget impacts Game and Fish's general fund programs. Obviously, the major topic this year was a decline in revenue and in forecasted revenue. So that was a big part of the entire year. Another reminder is this was the last year of this legislative group. So election this year, and that means that we'll see changes in leadership in the House and Senate, and also changes in membership of committees. Most important to us is the Travel, Recreation, Wildlife Committee. And just another reminder, Game and Fish often is asked the director or staff to go down to committee meetings and give information. We're not there to lobby, but we are there to answer questions that are related to potential impacts of bills, to provide if there's any financial impact of a proposed bill to legislators as they consider that. So big thanks to all the folks who kept everything organized. There's a lot of bills and a lot of moving parts. So Caroline Weinberger, who's here, Sheridan, Todd, who's not here, big help, Glenn Pauley, a lot of folks going to come together to make sure it all runs smoothly and we have all the information necessary to know what's going on with bills and also to keep you updated as well. So that's the overview. John will come up here and talk a little bit about the budget, and then I'll pop back in and take questions for you on the other bills.
Madam President, members of the Commission, Director Talbot, thank you, Rennie. As we are in the second year, FY16 portion of the FY15-16 general fund budget right now. So what we're talking about, as Rennie mentioned, is the general fund, the FY17-18 general fund budget. You saw that last August, and it did change quite a bit as it moved its way through the session. I think you're aware of most of these changes, so I'll go pretty quick. And if you got any questions, we can answer those, and we can certainly provide all these numbers to you by email as well after the meeting. So that started out, when you saw that in August, we had a standard budget request of $12.1 million. We had a total exception request of a little over $16 million. Most of that, as you know, was tied to the requirement for the Commission to request general fund support for grizzly bear management and health insurance. So that included $2.8 million for grizzly bear management and $12.6 million for health insurance. As that worked its way through the session, those were removed, as were all the other exception requests that were in the budget. We had, in addition to that, an exception request in vet services and in wolf management and in sensitive species. We did not get approval for any of those exception requests. In addition, late in the process, there were across-the-board reductions made to all state agency general fund budgets. There was reductions to in-state travel at 10%, out-of-state travel 10%, contract services for 5%. The good thing is because the Commission's general fund budget is not all that large, those impacts are not huge. That resulted in a reduction of about $110,000 for that category. There was also an across-the-board reduction of 1.5% for all object series. That was $169,000. So, bottom line is, approved budget is the standard budget now for the Commission General Fund for 17-18, which is $11.8 million.
Questions?
So can you break down that 11.8, please?
That 11.8 originally was a 12.1, and these are approximate. I'm not going to give you exact numbers. These are approximate. Okay, 12.1 million was the original standard budget request, minus 110,000. minus 169,000 for 11.8 million. What were those for?
What programs
Yeah,
are those in?
they were, pardon me?
Just do a program. Do you have that?
I do. By program, so the first reductions to in-state travel and
What's 11.8? What makes up 11.8? I got a mental issue with this stuff.
I'm sorry, yeah.
You tell me this every 2 months and I still can't.
Madam President?
5.
Commissioner Anselmi, that is for the standard budget, 2.6 million for aquatic invasive species, 3.7 for vet services, 1.89 for sage grouse, 1.4 for wolf, and 2.3 for sensitive species. And then those were each reduced in the amount in those two categories that I told you. And you want the breakdown of the reductions for?
Oh, that's fine. That's just round numbers is good, thanks.
So again, those numbers that I just gave you were in the original request. Those were reduced in those two categories to get 11.8 million.
Any other questions?
Madam President, so
Commissioner Crank?
as we head to the 17-18 budget, we have no money, no general fund support to manage grizzly bears. Is that what you're telling us?
Correct.
Grizzly bears or the insurance.
Any other questions?
So, Madam President, members of the commission, and again, we'll send these out to you, these numbers, so it's clear. The numbers I provided to Commissioner Anselmi just now, again, were the original standard budget. Those were reduced. So there is a reduction in those numbers that I just gave you to get the 11.8.
Thank you, that'd be
I'll send
great.
out
That would be
information.
super if you'd send that out. Thank you. Penny, your backup?
So other legislation, in total, the Game and Fish Department identified about 30 bills that we felt like would have some sort of impact on operations that we should watch to try to understand and be ready for, or in some cases provide information to legislators on. And occasionally some bills come up that have impact beyond those. Want to point one of those out to all of you, and this one is a bill that passed. It was Senate File 37, which is the party affiliation of boards and commissions. This goes into effect on July 1st of 2016, and it says that the new requirement related to party affiliation for the Game and Fish Commission is 75% of the members. No more than 75% of the members can come from the same political party. So that's a change that'll after July 1st. Another board is the Board of Outfitters. There's now no party affiliation with the Board of Outfitters, and the Wildlife Natural Resource Trust Board also now has no party affiliation required with it. So FYI for you on that one. 9 other bills that we were watching passed this year, and I can summarize some of those for you or answer questions, or probably more than that. We'll have some staff answer if you want to get into any details on any of those. Would you like me to go through those, or just? Great. So.
I was going, did somebody already answer? Because I was going to say, if you could just quickly, in case somebody jogs somebody's question, that would be great, Brandon.
Sure. The lifetime game and fish licenses, the Purple Heart recipient bill passed. The trespass to collect data amendment bills, there's 2 of those, one civil, one criminal, passed. Wolf depredation compensation related to wolf depredation in the predator zone passed. Off-road vehicle recreational vehicle use, that bill passed. A bill related to at-will employment contracts passed. A data management policy bill passed with a change, and then we had the joint resolution on gray wolves and grizzly bears. And the last one was the 2016 large project funding for the Natural Resource Trust Fund, and 2 of those projects are related to game and fish.
Questions? Commissioner Price.
I think the wolf compensation, they reduced that from $200,000 to $60,000 that were available for the compensation for the wolf in the predator zone.
President. And,
Yes.
and again, that will be administered by the Department of Agriculture.
Yes.
And I think you've all seen the summary of, and the director mentioned the TRW topics that are coming this year. And we'll keep you apprised of any changes on those meeting dates for the that committee as it does its work ahead of the next session.
Other questions? If not, thank you very much, Rennie. Appreciate the presentation. Let's take a 5-minute, if we could. I know, I'm feeling the same thing. But let's try to keep it to 5 minutes, make it short. Maybe we'll have time to even check roads and.
They're all closed.
Still, okay, did you just check? Thanks. Beginning. Start.
5 miles. I think it probably.
No, please don't. President Little, Commissioners, Director Talbot, good morning.
Good morning.
There are two property rights memos. The first,
What item we on?
19.
the first one, item 19, is the authorization to proceed with negotiations on property rights. And we have 4 items on that one. The first one being the Lake Hattie Public Access Area. So on the map here, we've got Lake Hattie, which is these basically 3 bodies, actually 2 bodies of water, total about 3,000 acres. And it's about 30-minute drive or so west of Laramie, I believe. And it provides fishing, boating, and camping opportunities for the public, very popular with the Laramie Valley folks. So basically, this access area, it incorporates the entire bodies of water through an agreement with the BLM on this area right here. And this area right here allows for a boat ramp and parking. There's also an outhouse. And then in addition, the public utilizes mostly this parcel right here for camping. So the ownership of the lake, it's basically 2 ownerships. The BLM owns a whole lot of parcels that surround the lake and include the shoreline of the lake. And most of the parcels, except for maybe one little spot that are left, are owned by Pioneer Canal Company. So for example, this parcel here, over here, all of those are Pioneer Canal Company. And Pioneer Canal Company has been gracious enough to allow the public to utilize their lands for recreation, but we don't have any formal agreement with them at this time. So, and then a third consideration about issues that we currently have at Lake Hattie is the access to Lake Hattie comes up a road, actually comes down here on a county road, and that road actually turns and goes this way. And where it turns, it's no longer a county road, and there's an area right where that circle is where we don't have an easement to get to the BLM land. So what the department is recommending is that we negotiate with the BLM, and one of the things about the BLM's parcels, the BLM parcels are now have been identified as parcels that the BLM would like to dispose. And so the department would like to work with the BLM to acquire all of the parcels on the south side of the reservoir. So that's this parcel right here, and this parcel. These could be acquired through a federal program called RPP, which stands for Recreation and Public Purposes Act, and they can be acquired at no cost. Just basically a transfer. It takes a long time to make it happen. So that would obviously continue to allow public access to that portion. The region has considered these other parcels up here, but at this time the main focus that the region is recommending is that we concentrate on the south side of Lake Hattie. In addition, the department would like to work with Pioneer Canal to go into and to negotiate a cooperative agreement to be able to utilize all of their shore properties, and they also own the majority of the reservoir, but have an agreement with them so that we can actually start to, well, one thing is to have an agreement that we can count on rather than just a verbal agreement, but also it'll allow for us to go in and do some things that needed to be done. For example, right here from water erosion, there's a pretty good size cliff, like maybe 20 foot, and it's sand. It's right along here, along the lake. And a lot of people, they drive all over this area, and they'll park their cars right there. I mean, one day a car could literally just fall off that embankment if it were to slide. So by having a management agreement, we would be able to do things like that that would improve public safety. And then the other thing is this little circle where we don't have access to get over to this BLM property, actually sits right in here. We need to acquire a permanent easement, and we would acquire that across here from Pioneer Canal. So what the department is, and I'll just list those. So we need to get a permanent vehicular roadway easement across Pioneer Canal. We need a cooperative agreement with Pioneer Canal for public access activities. We'd like to work with the BLM to acquire those parcels along the south side of the shore. And those are the three items. So the department would recommend the commission authorize the department to move forward with negotiations for these items.
Butch, is there, was there any ability to look at property on the north side? Or is that not included?
There may be that opportunity. The main part that's being used is the south side of the reservoir. There's a landowner, there's a developer, they're actually out of Arizona, it's called Wild Horse, and they have subdivided, and there's a number of homes that have been developed on their lots. Most of them are up here to the north. They also own this, and they own this right here, and they've actually on a airplane ride opened up the book, the United book, and there's an advertisement on a piece of Wyoming, and it shows a picture of a wild horse running across there, you know, and for those of you who are familiar with this area, it's not quite as beautiful as that particular picture was. But
Take high offense to that, Mr. Martin.
I apologize. I apologize. So anyway, there's a lot of development around there, and they are really mostly in this area here. It goes, is it Highway 230 or 130, whichever one goes across to the north side. Everything to the south of that highway down to the lake is developed already into a subdivision. And that's probably what will continue to happen on this north side.
President Little, I'll make a motion that the commission authorize the department to move forth on these three items.
Second.
Commissioner Culver has made the motion, and Commissioner Anselmi seconded the, to move forward, authorization to proceed. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. You have your authorization.
Madam
Butch.
President, I hate to, you don't get a vote.
I did not vote. I just said all those opposed can say nay.
Excuse me, I thought you voted nay.
No.
I misheard.
And I'm sorry, I mean, yesterday I meant that as a little levity, and unfortunately, apparently my comedic skills are not, are not up to par, and but today I simply meant to offer that anybody
misheard you.
opposed
I
could say
apologize.
nay.
The next item on the first memo is at Ocean Lake WHMA. Ocean Lake WHMA is about 11,000 or so acres around Ocean Lake, which is located about 20 miles west of Riverton. The property is managed primarily for waterfowl and upland game birds. And at the very northern end of the lake, some of our management that we have throughout the area around the lake is to irrigate ground to provide nesting cover for pheasants and also to develop wetlands for migrating waterfowl. And at the very north end of the lake up here, there's a pasture known as the shop pasture. That pasture currently has a irrigation delivery system. It comes in from up here. It starts off in a pipe that's roughly a quarter of a mile long, and then it turns into an open ditch which flows down here, follows this yellow line, turns around and comes back up, comes over here, goes into the field, and it feeds a gated pipe to irrigate the shop pasture over here. This is a pretty old delivery system. It's in need of repair, and what the department is doing is they're replacing the old pipe, which is leaking badly, and also they're going to replace the open ditch with new pipe. And when they do that, when they get to this part right here where they've got this big bend, they need to come straight across with the pipe. They no longer, since it's not going to be an open ditch and have to deal with following the elevations, they're going to come straight across, and we don't have an easement from this point to this point. It's literally like 30 feet. The landowner has agreed to grant us an easement. So what the department is recommending is that the commission authorize the department to move forward with the landowner to negotiate this easement for this little piece.
Questions? Commissioner Price?
Little, is there a, is he charging for it or just willing to go ahead and grant the easement?
He's just going to grant the easement at no cost.
Okay, I make the motion that we go ahead and accept it as
Second.
proposed. Can't turn something like that down.
Commissioner Price made the motion, and Commissioner Anselmi seconded to authorization to proceed on this. Further discussion? Commissioners, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
And all those opposed, please say nay. Motion carries.
Thank you. So item C on the authorization memo is the Fremont Lake Mule Deer bottleneck property. After yesterday's discussion, you're well aware of the the Red Desert to Hoback migration corridor for mule deer, and there's a property that bottlenecks right by Fremont Lake just north of Pinedale. It's this property right here. That property was acquired by the Conservation Fund. They closed on it. It's getting close to a year now. It was like last June they closed on it. And since they acquired it, they've held it in ownership and they've made a lot of improvements. This map shows some of them. Basically, the improvement includes things like the relocation, reconstruction, and new construction of fencing. This is some new elk fence here. They've removed some barbed wire fencing here. They've also done things like in this area right here, they've gone in, there was like a camper trailer pad in a building there. They removed it. They removed a big pile of rocks. So there's been a lot of work done, and when I say they, the Conservation Fund, they've had contractors. They've also had a lot of the public have gone out and volunteered time to do this work. It's kind of been reclaimed. The department volunteered a lot of time as well to go out and help this cleanup activity. The other thing that they did is they went through land records. They found that there's some current uses on the property that didn't have easements for their uses, and there were some other things that there were easements where they weren't being used. So they've gone through and they've cleaned up those property rights. So this property now is in good shape. There's a little bit of fencing work left to do as soon as the weather allows. And when they complete all this work, the Conservation Fund would like to donate this property to the Game and Fish Commission at no cost. The Game and Fish Commission, I might remind you that, I forget which meeting it was in Torrington. You did grant $250,000 towards the acquisition of this property. This property was a $2 million price, so it was a pretty expensive piece of property. The department would recommend that the commission authorize the department to move forward with negotiations towards receiving this land in fee title from the Conservation Fund.
Question, Commissioner Price.
Okay, President Little and Butch. What's the estimate, we'll move ahead on this, what's the estimate for the operation of this piece of property? We'll have the property taxes on it and maintenance type thing.
So the property tax estimate, I can have that for you at the next meeting, a really close number. It's so that you know, we're the only state agency that does pay property tax.
I understand that.
And by statute, they only are able to charge us the ag value. So when they do the calculations, it's ag value. So you might have an idea yourself as to what you're paying per acre, but basically it is 364 acres. And it would be valued as ag property. Okay. As far as maintenance and development of it, right now there is no plan to do any development. There is, my understanding is, someplace along the road here, probably where they removed these pads, there's already a parking area that's pretty well developed. But at this time, the department doesn't have any plans. There'll probably be some signage. Signage has gotten fairly expensive. It might be $2,000 or $3,000 for some signage. Fence maintenance, I'm sure, every year.
Well, the valuation of it as ag property up there is probably going to be pretty cheap, so it's not going to be a big, The signage problem, you say, is maybe 2,000 or 3,000. Okay. I'd make the motion that we go ahead and approve it as proposed by Butch.
Second.
Authorization to proceed, motion made by Commissioner Price and seconded by Commissioner Clavin. Discussion, Commissioner Anselmi.
I should know it, but is that a road there on the left by the fence, or is that just a fence?
You're talking about right here?
Yeah.
That is a road.
So is that road open now?
Yes, it is. This is actually the road that goes up to our Soda Lake unit.
Well, that's a road that, okay, it comes out of town to go to Salt Lake, and then when you back up there, then, as long as we got these maps, back up one,
I was going to go, let me go forward to this one, because this one kind of, this
yeah,
is the one you had asked me.
show that Elk Ridge property in relation to what we're talking about.
So we've talked about several different projects in the Pinedale area, or there's several different projects at the meeting that are being considered. And so this is our Soda Lake Wildlife Habitat Management area right here. And right here's this bottleneck property. Here's the town of Pinedale. There's a project we're going to talk about on the next memo, which is a special use permit for this road, which comes to a landowner who owns this 120 acres right here listed as number 1. So we'll be talking about that later, but just to put it all kind of into a general vicinity map. And this parcel right here, number 2, this is that Elk Ridge Lodge property that we had talked about yesterday that has the potential to be a conservation easement with public access. You can kind of see how this property right here fits within our unit. It actually touches right here. Access would come to the property on this same road for public access. I think this is a pretty steep draw coming down here, but basically there's a lot of connectivity between Forest Service, Soda Lake WHMA, BLM. Bottleneck actually ties us now to this other BLM, comes all the way down here to the state. There's a lot of connectivity right there for public activity.
All right, getting back to that road then, are we going to keep that, oh, that's the main road, I'm sorry. Okay, yeah, we got to keep that open, yeah. I'm sorry.
What, further questions?
No.
Any other questions or discussion? Then we have a motion on the floor. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
And all those opposed, please say nay. Motion carries.
The last item on the authorization memo is a property that was introduced to the commission about a year ago also. I can't remember the date, but it was in Buffalo, at our Buffalo meeting, I believe. And the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation has a acquisition project located near Alta, Wyoming. If those of you who don't know where Alta is, here's the state line between Idaho and Wyoming. Jackson sits right in here. So it's basically you drive over the pass and you get into Idaho, head north, and come back into Alta. And there's a property right here, the one in purple. It's 44 acres. And the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation has that property under contract for purchase. And that property, that 44 acres, there is an access road to it, which will, they're currently redoing the easement, but it will end up allowing the public to go into this property. And the access agreement is going to allow for 5 pickups with trailers. So in other words, up to 5 people to go elk hunting could enter this property, cross this property, and then it will open up public access for hunting to about 6,400 acres of BLM and Forest Service that is currently not accessible or very, very difficult to access. So Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation, they do have this property under contract to purchase. They intend to close on this property in June, and then they want to gift the property to the commission. The commission would at that time develop this property with a parking area, that five rig parking area, perhaps a corral or at least something to unload horses. Development costs could be in the neighborhood of $10,000 to $12,000 to include the parking area and whatever's needed for the horses and the signage.
Commissioner Price.
Commissioner, or President Little or Butch, is this that property that girl kind of organized and got things together to put together
Yes.
for access? Okay, that's, I just want to double check on
Price,
that.
yes.
Okay.
Commissioner Culver?
Now, Butch, as far as 5 vehicles with trailers, how will that be enforced? Is that just, if you're number 6, you just turn around and go home, or how exactly is that going to work?
President Little, Commissioner Culver, there will be signage, and the signage will basically say that there's no parking along the road, and those vehicles could be towed.
Madam President.
Commissioner.
As I remember the conversation from that young lady that presented this and put this together, I believe in that area over there, that I feel it will be self-enforced. I think those people that use that area, I think they will enforce that themselves. I think it's something that they wanted, they worked hard at, Rocky Mountain Elk, and this young lady that made the presentation. If that's what we're worried about, I mean, now we're jumping over dimes to pick up pennies. I mean, what difference does it make?
Yeah, I just wanted to know how we're going to enforce it. It's not a big deal.
Commissioner Crank.
Okay, President.
Sorry.
Little.
Wait, I'm first.
Yes,
I'd
you
make
are.
a
Commissioner,
motion that we,
Commissioner Crank has
Or
got a
two
question. I'm sorry.
I mean, is this is 5 vehicles per day,
6.
or 5 vehicles per season, or 5 vehicles per year? Do we know?
President Little, Commissioner Crank, it's a parking lot that's limited to 5 vehicles at any given time.
Okay.
And as far as the period of time that this can be used, the department will not be maintaining the parking area, for example, plowing snow out of it during the winter. There is a closure to this area. I believe it's sometime in December. And so it's not going to be like vehicles that would be utilized by anybody other than hunters, like snowmobilers and that sort of thing.
So just so I understand it, Rocky Mountain Elk is buying the purple land. Are they going to continue to own it?
No.
They want to transfer it to us?
They want to transfer it in fee to us, so we will take ownership of the property as well as the administration and management of the property. The property is irrigated. It's in very productive hay. The department would basically want to contract with the person who's probably already farming it now to put up 1 cutting of hay irrigated and leave the 2nd cutting for wildlife. And it would be utilized, the region says it'll be utilized heavily. Another thing too that the region pointed out is we don't have anything kind of on this western side of the range, and it's going to be opportunity for the region to develop some needed relationships with some of the landowners, ranchers, and the other community over there by having this presence near Alta.
And is there, as I remember this, we need an easement across private land to access the purple square?
So I can explain it better, and all this is happening before we take ownership. It's happening by the current owner, as well as the First American Title in Jackson. It's actually the manager of First American Title. It was his daughter that brought this project forward, and he's been working to get the homeowners association to write this as an easement. Currently, there's a homeowners association that allows access to all of the lots for residential purposes. That is being changed to accommodate this use.
And I guess what you're asking for authority to proceed, correct?
Asking for authority to proceed with negotiations with Rocky Mountain Elk, which what that's going to amount to is we would do public notice, because we're required by our policy to do public notice. We do public notice. Probably at the next meeting, we will have completed the public notice. It has to be 4 weeks, so it'll literally start like on Monday. And after we do public notice for 4 weeks, at the next meeting, we'll come back with any comments we got from the public and probably ask for final approval at that time, although the transfer probably will not occur until June.
will the easement through the homeowners association or through the private land be completed before we're asked to take final action to accept this property?
That easement will be completed before we're asked, well, it should be, I'll put it that way. And it will run with the land, basically.
Okay. At least just for one commission, well, I'll wait for my comment, I guess.
Further discussion? Commissioner Price.
We authorize Butch to proceed.
There's a motion that we authorize Butch to proceed on this matter by Commissioner Price. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Second by Commissioner Culver. All those in favor?
Real brief discussion, Madam President.
Oh, yes, certainly.
I would just hope, as one commissioner, that before we're asked to finally accept ownership of this and, you know, create the parking lot and build it, that easement be in place. Because if we don't have an easement to get to our 40 acres they're transferring to us, it's not worth anything to us.
When we bring it for final approval, if it's not in place, we could maybe make that a contingency on the approval.
Thank you.
Further discussion? Then all those in favor, please respond aye.
Aye.
And all those opposed, please respond nay. Motion carries.
The second property rights memo is the approval to acquire or dispose property rights. The first item is located at the Medicine Lodge WHMA. Medicine Lodge WHMA, it's composed, it includes about 12,000 acres. You can see most of it is BLM, some state, and if you add up all the different private in-holdings, the commission owns in fee about 2,000 acres. The property was acquired for mule deer and elk winter range. I believe there's about 500 elk and about 300 mule deer that winter on the WHMA. It does provide excellent hunting opportunities. But in addition to the wildlife activities that go on, there is an archaeological site. It's located right in here. And the archaeological site, by a cooperative agreement with state parks, is managed by state parks. And people come in and they view the medicine wheel and they view the different petroglyphs, or I'm not sure if that's the correct word, but at any rate, they get the cultural experience. And also, you can see the parking area right here for the cultural site in the state parks parking lot. Also, state parks provides camping, and the camping is used a lot by our constituents for hunting in the fall. And this particular agreement that we have, the cooperative agreement with state parks, it is expiring. And when it expires, the department wishes to renew it. And the renewal is going to include some additional land that they currently don't have in the agreement. Right now, I think it's like a 160-acre strip right here. And they want to add about 19 acres on the west side of the parking area. That happens to be an unproductive irrigated portion of the WHMA. And then they want to add about 6 acres just to the north that's along the Medicine Lodge Creek. And this total of 25 acres is going to be developed into additional camping, because right now there is not enough camping for the users. So the department does recommend to renew the cooperative agreement and to expand the cooperative agreement to include that additional 25 acres.
Questions? Commissioner Price.
You're abandoning some water rights on that piece that's not productive. Is that right?
We are not abandoning those water rights.
What are you going to do with them?
We're actually, the water rights team is working on water rights at Medicine Lodge. We've had, at our recent water rights team meeting, so the water rights team, Tom Manier kind of leads that team, and then it's about 5 or 6 people. It includes David DeWald and myself and Scott Coffin, several others. We are looking at the water rights situations at Medicine Lodge, and there may be some opportunities to make some changes to those water rights, and this would be one of them. But at this time, we're not asking to abandon those rights.
Okay, so you're going to retain them?
Charles, I can't hear you. Charles? Oh, I cannot hear you.
Excuse me, I'm sorry, Richard. No, I'm bad for that, so you can spank me for it if you want. But, okay, so we can proceed, and you will address those water rights, make sure we don't lose those?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Crank?
You said non-productive irrigated, which I don't know those two go together, but describe these 6 acres, and what is the current status of the water rights?
So the water right has been used it has been used not by the department, but it has been contracted to another party. It's very unproductive ground. The ideas in place, one of them has already got shot down. One of them was to actually build a fishing pond. That one can't happen because of the archaeological consequence. Right now there's some discussion about converting it to in-stream flow. So there's several different options that the department is considering that we would be bringing forth at a later meeting.
So they're currently being used and they're not subject to forfeiture or an abandonment petition?
They've currently been used. And when I say they've been used, I've seen some pictures. It looks like dirt. It doesn't look like they're growing much of anything, but the irrigation rights have been used. There are some other areas where we have rights at Medicine Lodge that literally you can't put it on the ground where it's at, and that's part of the reason for making some of these conversions to in-stream flow.
Further questions?
When
Commissioner
does our current lease with them expire?
I believe it's June. I believe it's in June.
And the department's recommendation is to go forth with this new lease?
Yes, it's a cooperative agreement.
Okay. Thank you.
Further questions, concerns?
I guess,
Commissioner Price?
President Little, without further questions, I make a proposal of just authorizing Butch to proceed.
This is an approval.
Oh, this is an approval.
Yes.
Okay. With the reservation that we do something with those water rights, I make the motion to approve, to make the agreement. I guess, are we making an agreement or we're all making a purchase?
Second.
Discussion?
Yeah, go ahead, Commissioner Crank.
I mean, what Butch is asking us, and correct me if I'm wrong, but what you're asking for us is to essentially allow a campground to be built on what is currently a adjudicated water right, and at least 6 acres of it. And if we vote for that today, then that's that's done. I don't know if you can reserve it, Charles. I think we need to address the water rights before we actually approve, this transfer of these 6 acres.
I would have to kind of go along with Commissioner Crank there. I think, and I know you don't have, you said you have ideas, but nothing concrete at this point, or which would you like to answer?
President Little and Commissioner Crank, some of the water rights are already being utilized by state parks to maintain lawns and part of the facility. And what we could certainly do is bring this back in April, and I can update you on where we're at on those water rights. It's quite a bit more. We already have a cooperative agreement in place. These water rights, as far as being used and subject to involuntary abandonment, that might already exist, just simply because the water rights are adjudicated to lands that are very, very difficult or impossible to use the rights on, and they've just been that way, and they've never been challenged. But I can certainly bring it back in April. That should give us time for the renewal period, and I can have some maps and stuff to show the water rights and provide you more information then.
I think that would be a good idea, because nonetheless, they are tied to the land, and you would have to get a state agreement to transfer those elsewhere or for usage as well.
Well, we weren't planning on like transferring them to state parks or anything like that by this agreement. It's just that we've got these water rights, and we're trying to figure out what's the best use of these water rights that we're currently not really taking advantage of, because there's not much opportunity for irrigating meadows and things like that with it.
Well, we do have a motion, and Commissioner Price and by Commissioner, would you like us to move forward and vote on that, Commissioner Price, or would?
Let's see what the support for it.
Okay, all right, so we will. Is there any further discussion before we take a vote?
Yes, one thing. I certainly trust the department on this, but I'd sure like to know more about this. I'd like some more detailed maps, if we could, Butch, on exactly what we own, what they're asking for, the term of the lease they're asking for, the terms of the lease. I'd sure appreciate that information.
And so President Little and Commissioner Culver, we do have the cooperative agreement. It's in your notebook, the one that we have worked with them for the renewal.
I'm not able to open that file for some reason.
I can run through, really the main part of these is the responsibilities of the agency, as well as the responsibilities of state parks. And I could run through those real quick if you'd like.
Do you guys want to do that now, or do we want to wait to?
I think that's fine.
Okay.
If you don't mind, right now we're discussing it, so we're about to take a vote on this, so I'm sure you'd like to know.
You want to withdraw the motion?
That's certainly up to you, Commissioner Price.
I'll withdraw the motion.
Caroline, did you get that? The motion is withdrawn. Thank you, Commissioner Price.
My second is not withdrawn.
Oh. Unfortunately, Commissioner Cloudy, you don't get to choose.
With the motion being withdrawn, what I would suggest is that we wait, and the file that you sent in the notebook, or that was sent in the notebook on this, I cannot open. But if we can open one, then we can read it ourselves and save having to go through it today.
That sounds good. Scott, would you like to comment, however?
Yes, President Little, members of the commission, Director Talbot. Something I think that needs to be added to the discussion is currently you can hunt this property right up to the campground. And in discussions with Wildlife Division, there's actually been instances where people have tried to harvest an animal, and the animal, before it expired, actually ran into the campground. So this new agreement would allow kind of a buffer zone between where you can hunt and the actual campground for the state park. So just thought you'd like to know that information.
Thank you. Commissioner Crank?
Madam President, just as one commissioner, I would suggest you come back and be prepared to discuss the water rights. We're transferring 6 acres of irrigated ground for, as I understand this, 2 state parks that will become a campground. And before I am comfortable voting on that, may be a great idea, but I want to know what happens to those water rights.
Thank you very much, Butch.
What?
Oh, yes, I'm sorry.
I can't open it either.
No. No.
So that document you sent is not open to me, Carrie, or Keith. I'll make that.
What do you say?
He's Commissioner Cloud. He commented that the document in question that we wanted to review was not. Some of us were not able to open it.
Okay.
And so Butch may need to resend or send in a different form. Okay.
So the next item for approval is the Chain Lakes Wildlife Habitat Management Area surface use agreements with BP for oil and gas development. So Chain Lakes, it's located from Rollins, right where we're at. It looks like it's about 56 miles. Basically, it's north and a little north and east of Wamsutter, Wyoming.
Going there after the meeting. Excuse me.
And the Chain Lakes WHMA was acquired for antelope migration and antelope winter range. It's about 62,000 acres in a checkerboard. The commission actually owns in fee over 30,000 acres. Oops. Got trigger happy. Owns about 30,000 acres in fee in the checkerboard. You can see the checkerboard, all the yellow is BLM, and all the kind of tan-colored stuff is game and fish. In the early 2000s, Anadarko leased their subsurface rights to BP, and there was the beginning of development with several wells. You can see these black spots. This 29-120 was the well that actually came before the commission for surface use agreement approval just maybe 6 months ago. That well has been developed. It is in place. And now BP has come forth and they wish to drill several more wells on commission lands. There's actually 3 different well pads, and the well pads actually are for multiple wells. So in our section 29, which is this section right here, they've got 1 well pad for 3 wells, another well pad for 5 wells, and then in our section 19 over here, they have 1 well pad. That well pad is actually going to have a well on commission lands and another well on BLM. And in addition, they're going to have a well pad on BLM right over here. So BP has drafted, and we've reviewed it, a surface use agreement. There's actually 2 surface use agreements. One of them is on section 19, one of them is on section 29. And those 2 surface use agreements will allow for a one-time payment of $20,949, and that payment is for their disturbance for the development. In addition, there is an old surface use agreement that was entered into in 1981, and it will allow for surface use payment based on production for each of those wells. So basically, those 3 well pads, they actually equal 9 wells. And each of those wells from that old agreement, BP has estimated that the production over the first year could result in an income of about $4,100 per well per month, and there's 9 of them. This is federal aid property, so that money, basically 75% of it, is, as you learned yesterday, the 75-25 thing, 75% of it is federal aid, 25% of it is game and fish, but together it equals 100%, and it would go into, I don't know the right words for it, I'm going to call it the federal aid piggy bank. Sorry. But at any rate, so basically that money could still be eligible for other expenditures that are approved by federal aid. So we've got $20,949 for the surface use agreement. We've got an additional surface use payment that has to do with production. And since this well on the BLM property, they need to use a road that's already on us to get to that BLM property. And the payment to use this road, the initial payment for the first year is $7,077. And for each year that they are in production on that well and that they're using that road, the payment is $3,538 per year. So the department recommends that the commission approve the surface use agreements for section 19 and section 29, including the agreement for the road to the BLM section 20.
Discussion, commissioners?
Okay, Little,
Commissioner Price.
do we have a surface reclamation bonding on this?
There
Or
is
some type of a agreement to, reclaim that when they move on?
So the surface use agreement does address reclamation. It also has language in it addressing sage grouse. So that is addressed in the surface use agreement.
Further questions or discussion?
Okay, nice.
Seeing none, we would entertain a motion.
I'll make the motion that we give Butch the authority to go ahead and proceed or acquire.
Commissioner Price has made a motion to authorize. Commissioner Anselmi a second on parcels 29, 19, and 20. Any further discussion? None, then all those please, all those who agree, please respond aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please respond nay. Hearing none, the motion carries.
Item C on the approval memo is relatively short. Basically, in 2011 and in preceding years, the commission has issued 5-year special use permits to a landowner, Joella Dugan, who owns this land right here. There's actually 120 acres. You can see a 40 and then an 80 that's located at the southwest corner of the Soda Lake WHMA. And what the special use permit does is it allows her to drive on the road of the WHMA over to her property. She utilizes the property mainly in the summer. And so this is a renewal of that expiring special use permit to allow her to continue to use our road for another 5 years to access her property. So the department would recommend that the commission vote to approve this special use permit.
Discussion on the special use? Commissioner Price.
I think
President.
Oh, I'm sorry, thank you.
I hate to beat this dog. So is that how Elk Ridge gets into their property on the same road?
President Little, Commissioner Anselmi, no. They do not access it this way.
Because that's them right, the big piece
So
that's around her right there, that's them.
this piece right here. Yep.
Thank you.
Further questions or discussion? Commissioner Price.
I'll make the motion that we extend the, excuse me, have Butch extend the offer to extend this for another 5 years.
Second.
That's a motion to approve the easement for another 5 years, made by Commissioner Price and seconded by Commissioner Anselmi. Further discussion? Hearing none, all those opposed, please, or all those in favor, please respond aye.
Aye.
And all those opposed, please respond nay. Motion carries.
The final memo, or the final agenda item for property rights is water rights at Bump Sullivan Reservoir. So in September of 2014, the commission had authorized the department to proceed with negotiations to acquire water rights at Bump Sullivan. We actually had some discussion about it on tour when we were at our Torrington meeting last year. Bump Sullivan Reservoir is part of the Springer Bump Sullivan unit. So this map here shows the whole unit. The unit is about 3,000 acres in total. The department manages this unit for geese, ducks, and pheasants. So in regards to the water rights at Bump Sullivan Reservoir, it's got 1,929 acre feet of water storage capacity. And that's actually owned in shares by about 10 landowners. And most of those landowners are currently not farming. And so there's been an opportunity to negotiate with several of those, and we've come to a verbal agreement with one of them to acquire their rights for 39 shares. So there's actually 641 shares total. Currently the commission owns 25 shares, and we have an opportunity now to purchase 39 shares from a landowner. It's an elderly couple. They don't farm, and they actually use their property for a couple of horses. Bottom line is, this will help acquire more of the water rights in the reservoir to assure that there's adequate water levels for the geese and the ducks, as well as hunting. This map right here shows all the parking areas, as well as these yellow squares are goose pits. In order to assure that we have enough water, 100% certainty, well, it's 100% as you can get with the drought. But basically, we need to own or lease 300 shares of water, and that would actually allow water up to where the pits are. And we currently own 25 shares. We currently lease another 69 shares. I'm sorry, 80 shares. And we're looking to buy 39 shares. So we're at a total now that would equal a total of 144 shares. So we're about halfway to the 300 that we need to assure that the water levels are always adequate. Those higher water levels also will help assure the opportunity to have a crappie fishery in Bump Sullivan. So the department is recommending the approval of the commission to purchase 39 shares at a cost of $1,300 per share, a total cost of $50,700 for these water rights. If you're interested in the process, basically what we will do is we will the current landowner will voluntarily abandon the water rights that's adjudicated to their 39 acres, and then it will go through a board of control process to move their storage right to us and to allow our use for the propagation of wildlife.
Commissioner Price.
Okay, President Little. So going through the abandonment and change, we're going to end up with water rights with current date. Is that correct? Excuse me, I'll get my... I said going through the abandonment and then reapplication, we're going to end up with these water rights at a current date level, right?
President Little, Commissioner Price, I don't believe that's going to be correct. What we're going to end up with is the actual transfer of a storage right. So in other words, there's storage rights, and then there's secondary rights to the storage to their adjudicated lands. And so we're going to end up with the storage rights with the storage right date. And those dates are 1911, I think 1917 and 1919. They're fairly good rights. They're like numbers 3, 4, and 8 or something out of 9.
That's my question was, so you're going to have the storage rights of 1911 or whatever that is.
Correct.
And the water rights, do we have water rights to meet those, fill those storage rights?
So the storage rights don't necessarily have to have a secondary right adjudicated to a piece of land. In this case, these storage rights will be in the reservoir. When we decide to use them, if we decide to use them, we're going to have, we're going to enlarge the present use, which is for agriculture. We're going to enlarge that use through the Board of Control action so that it will also include propagation of wildlife. Then we can just leave the water there, or if we wanted to use it, let's say for nesting cover, we could actually irrigate some of our meadows. There's actually meadows that we have that we could flow water out of Bump Sullivan to. We also have some a wetland area known as the Wellnitz Ponds. It's actually off the map here. There's some ponds. There's a series of wetlands that goes between Bump Sullivan and Springer, and we could also use that water to charge those wetlands.
Okay, but that would require a drawdown of our storage.
Correct. So our primary focus would be to but if there was an opportunity because of the amount of water in the reservoir, and if we wanted to do something else with it, that opportunity would exist.
Okay, thank you.
Further, Commissioner Crank.
Why do they have to abandon their storage right for us? Can't they just transfer it to us?
So
you said they were going to abandon it, and then we were going to somehow end up with it.
So President Little, Commissioner Crank, they're going to abandon the secondary right that's adjudicated on their 39 acres. They're going to transfer the storage right to us.
So that, President Little, so they're going to abandon their irrigation right for the 39 acres, or 39 really shares of that. And and then we transfer the storage right to us.
Yes. The 641 shares in Bump Sullivan originally had secondary rights on 641 adjudicated acres. When we bought the 25 acres about 3 or 4 years ago, there was an abandonment on 25 acres. So now out of that 641 acres, there's 616 acres that have secondary rights, and then our 25 do not have a secondary right. So we don't have to use it on a specific piece of property. We can just leave it in the reservoir for propagation of wildlife, fish and wildlife, if we want to.
I'm not familiar with the storage rights very well, so that's why I'm asking these questions. Okay, I think I understand.
Commissioner Crank.
Why wouldn't we want to acquire the secondary right, the irrigation right, which I assume has a pretty early priority date if the storage right is 1911? Why wouldn't we just transfer that to a different piece of property that we own?
The reason would be if we have a secondary right for irrigation, the use of our water would be tied to irrigating that property. The use of our storage right would be only to be able to irrigate that property. This gives us a much broader use of the water. It's really probably a more valuable right to us because we have total flexibility in how we want to use this water and where we want to use it.
So the original secondary right, we couldn't petition the Board of Control for a change of use for wildlife purposes and maintain that appropriation date? But we can do it, you know, once we get the storage right, we can apply for a secondary right, I thought you said, that involves wildlife propagation. Why can't we put that on the original appropriation?
So, and I need to look at the appropriation certificates to see if they're coinciding with the storage permits. I'm not sure which one came first. The storage permit, in my mind, may be the first one that came into being. The idea of the secondary right not having it is for added flexibility to the use of the storage right. We don't have to, if we do a secondary right, our water would have to be used on that specific 39 acres. The other thing is it might cause us a loss of how much water could be transferred because of their consumptive use.
Okay, I understand that, but I guess my question is, if we can put wildlife propagation on the secondary right, we will get once we buy the storage rights. I don't know why can we put that wildlife propagation use on the original secondary irrigation right? And I don't know if you answered that question. I don't know the answer to that question.
I think what you're getting at is if we got the secondary right, we have to have a beneficial use for that. Now, the beneficial use could be an in-stream flow defined for in-stream flow, but there's a secondary use for wildlife. I don't think it exists as a beneficial use. Is that kind of the gist of the thing?
The gist of it is that we're going to own the water in the reservoir and be able to use it anywhere we want, and it's going to have the priority dates of the storage right in the reservoir. And it's not going to be tied to a specific piece of land. When the last transfer occurred on the 25 shares, that secondary right went away, and now we have total flexibility with 25 shares. 25 shares equals about 75 acre-feet of water. And so that's the benefit of not having the right secondary do the storage right.
Okay. You're beyond me.
Further questions or discussion? Thank you, Butch. So we have a request to proceed on the Bump Sullivan water rights. Is there a motion?
I move that we authorize the department to move ahead to acquire these shares.
Motion made by Commissioner Culver. A second?
Second.
Seconded by Commissioner Clouda. Further discussion? All those in favor, please respond with aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please respond with nay. Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you, Butch. Rennie, you are back. Rennie McKay.
Last presentation for me today, and I know we have someone here for the call of the public, but we're close to hitting the roads. Wanted to go over the effort to get you some options and get some more educational efforts, and there's, we'll get into this in a moment, but kind of broader efforts on the front of education, recruitment, outreach, and goal here is to have you proposals and options at the July meeting, and heard from you was like some more options, get more going in this area, and to think big as we do it. So we put together an interdivisional team to start looking at this, and we had our first meeting. So this is really just to let you know that we're working and trying to make sure that if we're headed down the wrong path, that you let us know as we walk forward. Some background, again, we've got 7 regional information and educational specialists around the state, and so they are very busy on this front doing a lot of work. I'll share with you, and I can give you a paper copy now, but I'll give you, I'll share with you an electronic copy too that you can look at going forward, an inventory of our educational efforts from the regional level, and it's a long document. I think we've got about 10 pages of programs that are underway. Our folks interact with thousands of children and adults each year in this world of education and outreach. And so just to kind of immediately jump into this discussion, education is a term that some people use for everything we do when we interact with the public to try to give them new skills or to recruit them to become a hunter or an angler. And as we've looked at this, we feel like outreach encompasses this a little bit better. We're still trying to figure out if there's a great term for this, but it's more than just going to schools. It's more than just interacting with children and teaching them something. There's a lot to this effort. So that's where we're at, is just trying to make sure we have a good definition of this as we go forward. A lot of neat things are happening right now, but as you know, some of our marquee events, the expo that was held once a year in Casper is no longer being run, and also our youth camp and our teacher camp are no longer being run up at the Whiskey Mountain Camp each year. So we do want to look at that and look at where we could go in this world. And the other part of this too is that the governor's task force in that programmatic review that we're having a review of our educational efforts, our R3, which are recruitment, retention, reactivation of hunters and anglers, that program, and also a review of our magazine. And our magazine is a great opportunity to do outreach to all sportsmen and wildlife enthusiasts to talk about Wyoming's wildlife and educate them about it wherever they may be in their life and their learning. So lots of interest in this topic from the task force to the public to all of you, and we do want to get that going again. A little further background is in 2013, that's when there was a discussion about the programs that we're running, and in 2013, in a review of what was going on under this outreach umbrella, a group looked at this and said that the programs didn't measure enough about if we were recruiting new participants, and so wanted to try to have a balance of more programs that that were aimed at recruiting and measured it. And also in that discussion, there is a feeling that Expo and Youth Camp perhaps were not utilizing staff exactly to their maximum capacity and didn't align with their background. But the discussion then was that those should be revisited soon to figure out a way to look at them. Then came budget cuts, and so those programs, it was a significant savings to put those programs aside. And so that's what happened. But here we are, and I think as even that group then wanted to was to reevaluate those programs. But I think I've heard from you that you want more of just a reevaluation. You want us to think big and see if there's anything else we can do. And lots has changed even in the since then related to use of technology. We talked about social media and the growth there. A lot of young people go to their phones to try to learn something. If they want a new skill, they're just going to Google it. They're going to go to YouTube and find out, how you gut a fish. And that's what they want, those kind of resources. So a lot changing in this world. We're trying to come up with as much as we can and certainly doing a lot right now additionally. So being strategic about that, being strategic about the vacancies in this field. We don't have a recruitment coordinator. That position is vacant right now. We don't have a conservation education coordinator. That position is vacant. So we would like direction and some ideas to see if we can maximize and align those positions to meet the goals of the commission and gather this input from the folks who've been doing this for, a lot of them have been doing it for many years in terms of the education and outreach work. So that's where we're at. Did have some great discussions about brainstorming of what are some ideas for potential programs, tried to identify some goals. Generally, I'll give you kind of the rough look at these goals, and these are a draft. We're still going to keep working on them, but would like feedback if you think we're off target with these. We want to increase engagement and awareness about wildlife and about game and fish. We want to continue to build trust in the work, the reputation, and the expertise of game and fish. We want to increase participation in hunting, fishing, and other wildlife-related activities or wildlife enjoyment. And we want to continue to foster external partnerships and increase active collaboration with those folks who are formerly partners of ours or who are sportsmen's groups or wildlife groups, and also those folks who just care about these same ideas. So it's good brainstorming, some good start on this, but we're still aiming for July. That's kind of where we're targeted though with those goals. So that's just to recap what we're doing, and please let me know now or by email if you have any additional thoughts in this world or concerns.
Rennie, I just wanted to thank you because I know that I and I'm not alone, have put a lot of pressure on you to move forward in this. Like, it's not that we didn't recognize you had plenty to do otherwise, but it's important enough, and I know you think so too, so I really, really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there any, Commissioner Crank?
Madam President, I just, so as we look ahead, I understand that Rennie has many demands and we have vacancies and we have all that, but I'm really impatient on this front. We're going to approve a budget in July, and as I looked at the proposed budget, it's flat. There's no increases there. So if we're going to truly have an R3 program or hunter education and recruitment, we need real ideas and real proposals with costs associated to them by July so we can build it into the budget. So I understand the time, I'll stomp down my impatience and try to wait to see what we come up with, because it needs to come from the department. I mean, those are the experts that have been doing it, but I just think we need to get going on this. So, and if we're going to have a program, or start some new programs for the next year, it's got to be in that budget come July. And so, added pressure or whatever it is, it's got to be done by then so that we can get going on some of these things.
Further comments, discussion, questions?
Well, President, if I may, Commissioner, I believe actually that absolutely that's the goal. This is to say, if you want to do this, come commission, or this is our proposal, these are our 3 top ideas that would be additive, that would be new, and this is the cost, this is the resources associated with them. If you want to say, yes, this is so important, you should go hire more people, or if you say, don't hire somebody to do X and hire somebody to do Y, we want to have that proposal to you by July. But I do believe, too, if you want to come back to us in September and say, or we come to you and say, we got another idea, or you didn't like what we had in July, and you say, do more, we want something this fall that's a celebration of hunting, it's your budget, you can add that in at that point, too. But I think it is really important to try to have some direction and get that feedback in July, especially with hiring, because I'm tired of being in this place too, because we've got educational resources that some folks created, and we haven't even analyzed them to see if they meet our needs, let alone meet the needs of teachers. And so to have somebody on staff who would be an educational expert, if that's what we hear that we should do, is have better materials for teachers and for students to learn about wildlife, to learn about hunting and fishing. We need to review the stuff we have. Some great partners made contributions, and we've been sitting on that for too long, I feel like.
Madam President, if I might, just so maybe to give you some direction, at least from one commissioner. When we discussed this the other day when I was driving to Rollins, and I used strong language, I guess I would say, it's almost like we're haunted. Rennie didn't quite say it, but we're haunted by the ghost of a deputy director past, that everything we do in the R3 arena or hunter education has to have measurable outcomes. At least as one commissioner, this isn't a social science experiment for me. Stuff like the expo, I think, touched thousands of young hunters and fishermen and was an incredible program. Can we measure that after the fact and satisfy someone from, some national hunter recruitment and education expert? Maybe not, but that's not important to me, and so such as that has held up the process, or will hold up between now and July, or now in September, or whenever we come up with you present your ideas to us as one commissioner. That's not important to me. My mind would I would glaze over when we watch those presentations with 42 million lines, like we saw in our meeting in Du Bois, or we saw at the task force presentations. That whole idea of we have to measure everything holds no water, at least with this commissioner. We need to get out there and touch people, and I think there's a million ways we can do that. And we don't need to overthink it. We can have expos, we can have youth fishing days, we can have youth shooting days, we can have youth hunting days, we can evaluate Forever Wild, we can evaluate these materials. But I guess that's my impatience, that we're kind of haunted and held back by some deputy director who's now gone, who said this shall be the mold. At least as one commissioner, that's not the mold for me.
Well, and Commissioner Crank, if I might comment, and I'm not sure to what you're referring, but I would say that a lot of those educational programs actually, because those were programs that the commission had the decision-making control over when we were reducing the budget, unfortunately, and I'm impatient with you, and obviously, and I've responded to Rennie, and I made my comments earlier because I've really pushed him. And but I think that many of them lost their place in our budget just due to the fact that we had to so deeply cut the budget. And I believe that was the primary reason we lost those. If we're able to bring them back, you'll find me right next to you wanting to do that. So.
Well, Madam President, I thought your comments that you shared with me by email were awesome ideas, and I'm not being critical of anybody for cutting the budget. I mean, we had to do that, and I understand that, but these are all expenses that are Pittman-Robertson eligible, and as we discussed yesterday, we're in danger of leaving federal funds on the table unless we get going. And those need to be, to be Pittman Robertson eligible, they need to be built into the budget. We need to spend 100%, and we need to seek reimbursement from the Fish and Wildlife Service. So, and Rennie, I'm not critical of you at all. I love your enthusiasm. I love the way you're going about this. I'm just saying, let's not overthink it. And just as one commissioner, if we have to have statistics that measure how many hunters or fishermen we recruit because of an expo or 2 expos or 3 expos throughout the state, that's not important to me. And I don't care what the national authorities say. Our job is to touch young people and try to recruit them to hunting and fishing in the outdoors. And I think there are many ways we can do it. There were some great suggestions in Madam President's email. But if we're overthinking it because we believe we have to have a statistical study at the end of the day, that's not important, at least to me.
President, just to add that there are folks in that world who do feel that it's important to them, the measurability, to know if they're actually having an impact by their work. And so, I do think our experts inside the department, not just any ghost or national folks are driving that. There is an internal desire too to try to figure out if this work we do in this kind of voodoo communications outreach world is having an impact and being beneficial. But I think what I hear you saying is don't let that slow you down. So if folks, and I want to try to figure out if it's working too, but I hear you loud and clear. We can't let that keep us from slowing us down to try to build in all that work. And we've got some good things in there that we have built already that can help measurability. And so we should be able to just do programs. And if we, it is all social science. So it's, if we try to measure and that's the right way to measure, is also going to be questions that we're going to have to deal with. But I will just let you know there are folks internally too, and I'm one of them at times that I want to try to gauge if this is we're doing it and having an impact. But I also hear you.
I'm an outlier, I guess. But I'll quit.
Further discussion? Comments? Thank you very much, Randy. Really appreciate your presentation.
Okay. Thank you, President.
You bet. All right, I do have, we're going to move forward with a call to the public, and I do have one blue slip from Mr. Brian Woodward. He comes to us representing the North Platte Walleyes Unlimited, and welcome.
Thank you, President Little, Commissioners, and Director Talbert. I've given you a copy of basically a slideshow, but it's more of a primarily just an outline for myself to kind of keep this directed appropriately. I am Brian Woodward. I've lived in Wyoming since 2003. I actually moved up here with Walgreens, worked for Walgreens Corporation for 22 years. And when I moved up here, I had spent almost all of my life fishing trout in Wyoming. Didn't really know much about walleye fishing. However, one of my first trips out in the outdoors in Wyoming was walleye fishing at Pathfinder Reservoir. Since then, I've pretty much been hooked on walleye fishing and the opportunities that our state has provided and you have provided for us, and I thank you for that. I became active with the North Platte Walleyes Unlimited. I was a club president for 4 years. The club is dedicated to the preservation and encouragement of walleye fishing. We've done some phenomenal things. We've worked with the Game and Fish to provide resources for gravel for AIS and sites. We've done things with the fire department for life jacket programs. We provide fishing poles to youth at a lot of the derbies like the Yesness Pond and throughout the state of Wyoming. So we've done a lot of things to be active with fishing and trying to get our youth involved as well. I currently also run the Wyoming Walleye Stampede, which is a catch and release walleye tournament that we run at different lakes throughout the state, but primarily we focused on Glendale Reservoir just because of the centrality of pulling teams from Nebraska and Colorado and Wyoming itself. I've ran that tournament since 2009. Last year, we averaged 105 teams per tournament. We ran three regular season tournaments. We ran a championship at Pathfinder last year. We averaged 105, but we touched more than 350 teams of anglers. So over 750 individuals that are out there actually enjoying our resources. However, because of my involvement with walleye fishing throughout Wyoming, and because I work retail, I'm also a manager of Rocky Mountain Discount Sports in Casper. Fortunately or unfortunately, that allows people to come and speak to me on a regular basis, because working retail, I'm on the floor quite a bit. There's been, Al Condor has asked for some public comment. They're looking at doing a proposed rule change at Pathfinder Reservoir, increasing the creel limit, daily possession limit to 12 walleyes. I've gotten a lot of phone calls. I've gotten a lot of people stopping by, just knowing my involvement in the walleye world, I guess. We've collected 360 signatures of people that are opposed to raising that limit. What is the real issue? The real issue is that we're spending a lot of resources in putting trout into Pathfinder Reservoir. And last year, Game and Fish was able to allocate extra resources and stocked over 300,000 7 to 9 inch trout in Pathfinder. When they gill netted it in the fall, they didn't get the gill netting results that they would have liked to have seen. So based on that, you know, the walleye got blamed that they're eating all these poor little trout, and I'm sure they are eating a fair share of them. Also, Game and Fish is concerned that the large trout are on the decline at Pathfinder. So Game and Fish is proposing to raise the limit to 12, up from 6, to bring a better balance to the fishery in itself. The information that I've received from Al, and I do hope that I've been speaking with Al Condor pretty extensively. We've had numerous conversations, him and myself and Gordon, that the 18-inch fish are the ones that are really primarily targeting their 7 to 9 inch trout. So the angler's concern is many. A lot of anglers that I've talked to that are targeting walleyes are extremely happy. The anglers that we've talked to that are targeting trout are also happy. I've got a lot of data from the Hog Derby, which was an ice fishing tournament that kind of speaks to the number of trout that were weighed in at a derby. It was only 15% of those fish were actually walleyes that averaged about 15 inches long, whereas the trout averaged 18 to 20 inches. And surprising to me is that even during that derby, there wasn't many fish over the 21 inch on the trout or walleye side. But you know, a lot of people have voiced, well, geez, if it's so expensive to stock trout, and if they're not self-sustaining, you know, why don't we manage it for a walleye fishery? You know, we've got obviously some fantastic trout fishing throughout the state. A lot of those are on our river systems, especially the North Platte. So that's one of the concerns that people have had for me. A lot of the walleye fishermen feel that the information and data that we've been presented is biased. These aren't necessarily always all my views, but they're views that people have come to me with. One of the main concerns is that a regulation change, coupled by a couple of years of poor water levels, could deplete the walleye population at Pathfinder. And before the water levels and regulation could be changed back, that a 12 fish limit could deplete that beyond repair. And we currently don't stock walleyes in Pathfinder Reservoir. So we would be building from basically zero with the right conditions. Obviously, the high water is great for the fisheries all the way around. And I've got some pretty interesting data that one of my anglers that fishes my Stampede tournaments, I'm required to keep fish samplings and data. We do all catch and release, but the anglers measure the fish, we release them on the water, they go bye-bye. But we take all that data, we provide that to Game and Fish. I've had numerous conversations with the division that, you know, the information that we're providing in terms of a sampling, over a course of a weekend at Glendo, we can provide usually over 1,000 fish, 1,000 to 1,200 fish per event. We're giving them increments of what those fish are in quarter-inch increments, which to me should somehow overlap with the gill net surveys that we're currently doing, and to see some trends. Because our information is going to be slightly skewed to the upper side of fish because our anglers are targeting the larger 15+ inch fish. And so we don't get a really good sampling of what the recruitment of, you know, the 12 and 13 inch fish look like. However, taking 6 years of data that I've received from Glendo, putting that into a spreadsheet, looking at it in groupings, and I mean, Glendo's doing really well with the exception of we don't have any big fish. Only 5% of our walleye, which it's primarily a walleye lake, only 5% of the fish are over 23 inches. So raising the limit to 12 at Pathfinder has a lot of questions. 12 would be by far the most that any state across the United States has for a creel limit. At 6, we're one of the most aggressive. Most states have a 4 to 6, 4 to 5 is really the primary, with a 2-day possession limit, which allows a family to go out camping for a weekend, keep a limit of fish both days. And we're not opposing to that. In fact, that's one of the solutions of kind of what we would like to possibly present to Game and Fish as a solution to the overpopulation of Pathfinder walleye. But there's a huge economic value of walleye fishing, and I think that you know, the last full statewide creel survey was done in 1996, and we could pretty much bias any creel survey depending on time of year, time of day, when we actually do those creel surveys. If I were to do a creel survey right now at Alcova Reservoir, and I targeted morning hours and evening hours, I'm going to catch a lot of walleye fishermen. If I wait till July to do that creel survey, I'm going to get probably 90% trout fishermen. So there's a couple things that we're looking at, but on the economic value of things, there are some bait shops, you know, out of Shoshone, Boysen Reservoir, who say that like 90% of their sales contribute to walleye fishing. Boat dealers in Natrona County, such as Driven Marine and Extreme Performance, have actually added, you know, more fishing lines and fishing boats that specifically walleye-specific boats to their lineup, which some of them have said that close to 50% of their boat sales are now contributed primarily to walleye fishing. In retrospect, a walleye boat, guys that are fishing my tournaments, it's very impressive, and I've offered to take Mr. Talbert out at times. I've run across him occasionally through the store or through Casper, and it's very impressive to see 100 boats lined up. You know, I string them out to the middle of the lake on takeoff, and to see 100 boats lined up where probably the average cost of a walleye fishing boat is $60,000. Driven Marine carries some top-end Ranger walleye boats that range in that $85,000 range. So our anglers are spending a lot of money in town. Those boats burn up a lot of fuel. We buy a lot of tackle. We buy a lot of live bait. So we do feel that, you know, there is an economic value to the walleye fishery. I love walleye fishing. I love catching just about anything. But I floated the river with the Crazy Rainbow outfitters last Friday with my son, and I love catching trout as well. But if you look throughout the state, there's not one boat sales place to buy a drift boat in the state of Wyoming. Although we may do 40 or 50 shuttles on the North Platte with fly fishermen, those guys aren't spending their boating money here. They don't require fuel. So there are added expenses that our walleye guys are spending outside of the trout guys. There's numerous tournaments that go on and derbies that go on throughout the state that attract teams from numerous states. Again, last year we had about 365 teams that attended our events. And last year we had attracted teams from 7 states. So we do have a good draw. Those anglers are purchasing park passes, fishing licenses, AIS stickers, hotel rooms, RV spots, bait, groceries, etc. These tournaments have really helped promote our state as a destination walleye fishery. I've had the good fortune of fishing throughout the entire country. I fished professional tournaments for about 5 years. I've won numerous tournaments. I took second place at the World Walleye Championship 2 years in a row in Prairie du Chien, Wisconsin on the Mississippi River. We have a phenomenal fishery for the little that we do for trying to maintain the walleyes. And I've had the opportunity over the last couple of years to have Doug Stange with In Fisherman magazine, who's been with In Fisherman for 35 plus years, come out I worked with them at Boysen Reservoir. We taped a show there for walleye fishing, and we did so good the first day. He's like, well, let's go catch some trout. And we did an episode of catching trout. Last year, he came out, and we did an episode on Pathfinder Reservoir. And you'll see in the picture on the slide there is that we ended up landing 2 30-inch walleyes during the taping of the show, which isn't common, but we were very fortunate. Again, we've been highlighted in episodes of like the 2016 Walleye Guide. We were in the June episode last year as a destination fishery. So the economic value of being able to attract big names like these Doug Stangeys of the world to come and actually want to tape a show here is pretty phenomenal and does have some value to us. But as anglers have come up and talked to me, and they're like, we can't do this. I'm the type that always wants to be able to provide some type of solution. So I'm coming to you before the commission and before the proposal actually gets brought to you, that we take a better look at some things and to not have a knee-jerk reaction to change regulation without further studies. Anglers would really like to see a more extensive creel survey completed on the reservoir that's not biased to trout. So again, if we do a statewide creel survey, 80% of our waters are probably related to trout when you look at streams and creeks and the reservoirs, especially down on this end of the state. But when we look at the North Platte system, obviously all of our river systems are loaded with trout, but our reservoirs, are starting to get a bigger impact of walleye. So we'd like to see it either help with creating a creel survey, offer our resources. We'd also like to see a population study done on Pathfinder. I did run a championship tournament at Pathfinder last year. We put in our own creel limit. We actually a reduced creel limit, and we limited the size of fish that people could bring in. Normally all of our tournaments are catch and release, but one of the regulations as of July 1st, we're not allowed to have a live release tournament. In our live release tournaments, there are some rules that we have to follow. So anglers are only allowed to keep 5 fish in a live well at a time. Once they hit a live well, they can't take them out and put them back in. One of our people running our tournaments has to be that person. So normally what happens is as they catch the fish, they decide that that's a fish they want to take. They put it in the live well. They go to one of our weigh stations. Generally, there's 3 or 4 on a reservoir. We jump in their boat. We measure their fish. We write it down, release the fish. If the fish is not releasable, they're required to harvest that fish, and that has to go towards their weight for the day. So we do put some rules in place to encourage taking care of their fish. If they have a dead fish, it gets half of their weight. So our anglers really are. So last year when we did our Pathfinder tournament, and having to know that it was a kill tournament, we changed up the rules. We said, okay, well, we don't want to have a big public stipulation coming at us that says, boy, you killed 1,000 walleyes on the lake over a weekend. So we dropped the limit down. We said any fish between 15 and 21 inches you can keep. However, any fish over 21 inches, we wanted you to take a picture of it. We gave them a little, basically a poker chip with a day on it. They had to take the picture of it in a trough, and then there was some level of trust that they would measure it properly, and so we reviewed the pictures at the end of the day. But any fish over 21 inches went right back into the reservoir. With that data, we ended up, I don't have the exact number, but it was like 368 total walleyes that we measured in over the weekend. And out of those, there was only 15% of those fish were over 18 inches. So the data that we're kind of receiving, that there's all these big walleyes eating the stalker trout, we've got 100 of the best anglers in the region coming from multiple states trying to target the biggest fish, and we didn't see it, although there was some nice fish. But we would like to be able to have a population study to really determine how many big fish we think are in there. And I know that there's a cost to that, and I have a solution for that. We also would like to see them manage our trout waters for trout. So one of the things that's happened at Pathfinder is back in 2012, there used to be a trout limit of only 1 fish over 20 that could be harvested on the trout side. They removed that limit. Well, it appears now there's no fish over 21 inches. So the people that are out targeting trout when they catch a 21 or 22-inch trout, they're harvesting it. So that could be one of the reasons for not having large ones. But I also I think that I was talking to Al about Buffalo Bill Reservoir in Cody, and when they found walleyes in there and they made it a mandatory harvest and no limit on walleyes there, I asked him how many people had complained about that, and he's like, oh, I don't recall of any, or very few anyways. And I think that as a general consensus is that we want to manage our trout waters for trout, but maybe we could do something with the walleye as well, because Glendo is a destination fishery for a lot of people from Colorado and Nebraska, including ourselves. So maybe what we could do is have an effort to say, well, we know that fish are coming out of Pathfinder and moving up into the Miracle Mile portion of the North Platte, and we should draw a line that says, if a fish is caught above a certain area, above the bridge, that it's a mandatory harvest. If a person catches a fish below Gray Reef on that section where all of our guides are practicing their drift boats and all their businesses down there, they catch one there and make it a harvest. If they catch one in Fremont Canyon, we're probably not going to get them out of there. I've talked to Al about, we did raise the limits to walleye at Alcova Reservoir to 12, and I asked him, I said, well, how is the result on that come out? And he said, well, preliminary data shows that actually the walleye population is probably booming there. And so basically the angler harvest hasn't really affected that Alcova. And their thought there was that, well, the fishing was so good at Pathfinder that everybody went to Pathfinder and just went right past Alcova. It's hard to catch a fish at Alcova, and there's reasons. I mean, there's a lot of bait fish, and there's a lot of boater activity, recreational activity. We'd ask that maybe we spend some of our our financial resources not just to stock trout, but maybe to use a portion of those to supplement a bait forage, whether it be spot tail shiners, emerald shiners, fatheads, something that both the trout and the walleye would succeed with. Again, put the limit of 1 trout over 20 back on Pathfinder. Manage the Miracle Mile as catch and release. We allowed bait fishing to people to use bait back on the Miracle Mile a few years ago. And I understand that we want people to be successful, but that could also be a decline. It doesn't get a lot of enforcement from what I've seen. I have seen anglers with stringers full of fish off the shoreline that aren't the fly fishermen, but just bait fishermen that probably aren't aware that there's only a 3-fish limit and a 1 over 16 limit. I'd really like to see, and I don't know how we could possibly do it, but work some type of a management plan that gets the Bureau of Rec to really work with us on our water levels, because consistent water levels definitely are much better for our fisheries in general. Both the trout and the walleyes both do well when the water levels are high. So we'd like to offer some suggestions. In terms of like the population study, we do have another tournament planned on Pathfinder Reservoir. I would encourage the Game and Fish to work with us and possibly allow us to have a release tournament in July, or if nothing else, at least put a biologist in our boat for the weekend, a couple biologists where they can actually sample, talk to anglers, how many fish are you catching, what size fish are you catching. We have a great opportunity that we can catch fish and release them without hurting fish in most cases. We have the opportunity to tag fish, to check on mortality rates and just to get some history on that. The data that I've been able to provide, I mean, just from Glendo alone, I mean, I'm able to graph sizes of fish in conjunction with water levels and really see how the water levels are hurting that recruitment of the smaller fish throughout the years. But I would like to be able to provide some of that same data for the Pathfinder Reservoir in terms of the walleye fishery in general. So we're not completely opposed to a 6-fish limit or a 12-fish limit, but I would personally rather see a 6-fish limit with a 2-day aggregate possession limit, pretty much in line with the rest of the states out there. One problem I have with raising the limit to 12 is that we've also got a warning out there from the Department of Health that says we recommend that if you're a healthy individual to only eat 4 meals of walleye a month. So by increasing the possession limit, we're basically saying, eat more fish, because we don't want them to go to waste. And I think that that could be a potential health concern for people down the road. Thinking outside the box, you know, I've talked to Al about even doing a quota system. So once we do a population study and we've determined that we've got 3,000 extra fish that are over 18 inches that are potentially hurting our trout fishery, that we add it for the month of July or August, whatever that month is, do a quota system and say, well, you can keep 6 fish under 18 inches and 6 fish over 18. Just like we manage our elk herds and everything else. Casper Mountain's open for, you know, to shoot sows up there, and you get 6, and every day you got to call and make sure that the quota's still there. We pretty much have somebody working with the AIS check station at Pathfinder a lot of times during the month of July because of how much activity it gets. It'd be a great opportunity to utilize that person to do some creel surveys and to see what the angler mortality rate is on the lake. But really, I mean, I'd like to offer my services just as a collaborative effort. We've got a lot of resources with a lot of boats on the water, an opportunity to get good, solid, raw data that can be used to make a better decision down the road on how the walleye are definitely affecting the trout. So yeah, that's really all I have.
Thank you very much. Commissioners, do you have any questions for Mr. Woodward? Commissioner Anselmi.
When does that come up, in July, in April, when we talk about the?
I think the public comment is open until sometime first week of June 6th or 7th, and I think at that point.
We'll get some clarification on that from Chief Fowden here perhaps in a minute for you. How's that? Any other questions? Commissioner Price.
You know my son Clay?
I do know your son Clay.
How did he put you up to this?
I'm definitely a person of action. I mean, I have no problem. I've added working in the corporate world. I've been in front of people quite a bit, and I like to speak my voice. But I like to find a balance, just like you all, with keeping a balance and keeping people fishing. And I've had some great opportunities running our fishing tournaments. Again, we've got a great resource of anglers on the water. And one of the things we did 4 years ago, and as Rennie was talking about education and whatnot, we've had the ability to work with the Boys and Girls Club. We also worked with the Rec Center out of Shoshone and some individuals off the Indian Reservation, where we've got anglers that pretty much, some of them spend a whole week on the lake trying to target the walleye, where they're at and how they bite and all that kind of stuff. And through the years, I've been able to work with the anglers and say, geez, we're pretty fortunate to drive $60,000 boats and $50,000 trucks and $40,000 campers and come out and spend vacation time and to do what we love to do. And so we've been able to give back to the community. For the last 4 years, we've offered kids fishing events where we call it kind of fishing with a pro. And we worked with the Boys and Girls Club and these other organizations they bus them down to the lake through efforts with Rocky Mountain and Sportsman's and a couple other manufacturers. We've been able to put fishing poles in kids' hands, and you really get a good feeling about being able to show them the outdoors, especially a lot of those kids that are involved with the Boys and Girls Club are underprivileged. Maybe they only have one parent, and the anglers time after time get to start learning about these kids, and they're like, well, if she comes, I want to work with her because she lost her dad and this and that. And so we've built some great relationships, and these kids, the look on their face and some of the stories that are just phenomenal. But the kids, you know, we put them a fishing pole and a little tackle box, and they walk down to the boat ramp and they see all the boats lined up. We usually have 15 boats and put 2 kids in each boat, and then they go fish for 4 hours with the pro. And some of these guys have really nice boats, some of them don't, but they have a great time and they're there for the kids. And these kids, the look on their face, I mean, one kid walks up to a boat and he has an $80,000 boat, and the guy is trying to pump the kid up. He says, "Whoa, you got a fishing pole?" And this kid goes, "Yeah, you jealous?"
Brian, yeah, I'd kind of like to hear our fisheries manager here response, if you could, please.
Sure. No? Nice to meet you. Oh, okay.
I like that word balance. I appreciate Mr. Woodward's traveling to appear and express his management options on the options we're exploring. And in fact, we were the first to take it to the Walleye Unlimited Club, knowing that such a regulation proposal, and that's all it is, would generate some controversy. Let's think about balance. In 1982 through 2000, an 18-year stint, the Game and Fish Department put a regulation together for walleye on Seminoe Reservoir. And that was a bonus so that it would allow anglers to take 20 walleye a day. In 2001, and by the way, that worked. The reason to do that was to balance the walleye predation on trout against trout angling interests, and it worked. It worked well. The walleye population was suppressed. The trout numbers came roaring back. In 2001, we took that bonus off and switched the creel to the statewide creel of 6. Why? To balance walleye angling needs against trout angling needs. Precisely what we're trying to do at Pathfinder now is balancing all fisheries interests, and I think we can do that. This is classic fish management. The one thing to notice, though, is this does take time. When we make a change, it doesn't happen overnight. It didn't happen overnight on Alcova Reservoir, as we just heard. The trend takes a long time to reverse, but we can, in fact, monitor that. 3 years ago, the Casper Fisheries Group became concerned about the increasing walleye population and size structure, so bigger walleye and more of them, not only being caught in the reservoir, but also what they were seeing in their electrofishing sampling in the Miracle Mile, a world-famous trout fishery. At the same time, they noticed a decline in the trout population. And this is despite us stocking many more larger trout to try and avoid predation. So we've spent 3 years and 3 years ago coincides with the time we looked at changing the Alcova Reservoir regulations. They decided, let's give it a little more time. Let's give it 3 more years. Let's see if this trend continues. The trend has continued. So they put together a regulation proposal, and it is just an initial proposal. It has not even come to my desk yet. This is very premature for us to have these discussions in my viewpoint, because Mr. Condor and the walleye interests and the trout interests are still trying to come up with a proposal that will hit my desk and that you will see as the public process starts in May, and you will see at your July 7th or 8th commission meeting in Pinedale. But it is good, as Mr. Woodward noticed, or mentioned, that the dialogue continues. We have not set on a regulation proposal. If we don't seek a balance, then we really need to severely reduce the number of trout we stock in that reservoir, or abandon trout stocking and management in the reservoir. About 50% of the anglers out there, best as we can understand, fish for trout. That is the reason for us to try and maintain that balance. Now, I just want to say a couple things about our management. Just this year, we went out and for several weeks with the Nebraska Parks and Wildlife folks, went out and got gizzard shad, a forage species needed at Glendo and Keyhole reservoirs. A very expensive operation, needed to prop up the walleye population in Glendo because we had lost most of our gizzard shad. A year ago, we also brought in or suspended the 12-year moratorium on importation of live bait minnows from out of state. This to benefit especially walleye anglers. Several years ago, we embarked on a special regulation that the walleye anglers wanted on Glendo to provide a better size structure in the harvest. That took a lot of survey, and we implemented that, and that's continuing. And that's why we see some of the great fishing in Glendo Reservoir today. This year, Garrison National Fish Hatchery provided us 4 ponds worth of fish, and those were walleye and sauger that we stocked into the state of Wyoming. The basis of that were trout egg trades to the state of North Dakota. Mentioned what was mentioned earlier was emerald shiner and gizzard and spot-tail shiner introduction. We did that. We did that in the 80s. I guess the point in all of this is we do a lot to manage quality walleye fisheries in the state of Wyoming. And ours is not to eliminate or reduce, severely reduce the quality of that Pathfinder walleye fishery, but in fact bring it into balance. So all anglers have an opportunity. And that's what we're hoping to do. And we'll trot this regulation out, our regulation proposal out for our public meetings beginning in May, and then we'll come before you with those results of those public meetings. And with that, I stand for questions.
Commissioner Crank.
This gentleman mentioned potentially having our biologists in their boats. Have we ever pondered that?
Well, we've done that on other reservoirs, yes.
But that seems like that'd be a good chance to obtain some additional data.
Well, certainly.
And then secondly, my second question. Oh, do we have a regulation that prohibits live release in fishing tournaments? You mentioned that
Yeah.
they changed or something. I didn't understand. Can you explain
Yeah,
that? Let him go ahead.
President Little, Commissioner Crank, yes, we do that as part of, when we look at live release tournaments, we have live release tournaments. We authorize those. Do understand that that our regulation says that once you possess a fish, in other words, you don't release it immediately to the water, then you must keep it. And so those regulations for the tournaments are actually a concession to try and allow them to return walleye to the water when the water temperatures are amenable to that, amenable to the survival of those fish that are released. After that, later in the summer, that is when we go to kill regulations.
So is there a July, you can release them before July 15th, but you can't after, or is it something like that?
That's correct.
July 1st, and they based it on a water temperature of 70 degrees.
Okay.
And just for a lot of people are...
I'm okay.
A lot of
Thanks.
people are associate like the release tournaments with bass fishing, where they keep them in a live well all day long. Probably through your guys' own efforts, we've created a progressive live release tournament so that the walleyes, they can't be in a live well more than 3 hours, only 5 at a time. Although each angler has a 6 fish possession limit, there are other rules. So, I mean, and again, the way we designed our tournaments with the number of weigh stations is that if a person goes from one part of the lake to the other part of the lake and goes past the weigh station, it's in their best interest to have those fish measured and get back into the water as quickly as possible. I do feel that based on this type of a format, we're not keeping fish in a bathtub all day long and then waiting at the end of the day to weigh them in. We really do feel that, I mean, with today's
My
technology,
question was just about what our regulations are. I'm good. You don't need to explain.
Commissioner Crank, please.
That we do feel that we should be able to run those events later in the summer as well, because with the modern boats and aeration and that type of stuff, we really don't feel that having those stipulations on this are required.
Thanks.
Any other questions or comments?
Commissioner, President.
Yes, Commissioner Anselmi.
So when did you do this creel survey on Pathfinder? You done not a creel survey, a gill net.
Yeah. Yeah, President Little, Commissioner Anselmi, we do that every year. We're monitoring those populations annually.
And so Miracle Mile flows into Pathfinder, so that's what you're concerned about too, is
Yeah, Commissioner Anselmi, the Miracle Mile is sampled using electric fishing instead of gill nets.
What happened with you got a 12 fish limit on Alcova, what's happened with, and then somebody said they're just growing faster the more you catch, is that right, or what?
It'd be better if Al Condor from Casper were here to answer the particulars, but as I understand that, we have a growing walleye population there, and they are growing faster than our ability to harvest them. The reason to put in the limit of 12 is to try and attract walleye anglers who are adept at taking walleye out and try and get back that balance of a fishery. That was one of the most popular fisheries in Casper for shoreline anglers who fish for rainbow trout, and that is in steep decline right now.
Further questions? Well, Chief Fowden and Mr. Woodward, we really appreciate both of your comments and adding to the day, and Mr. Woodward fighting the weather to get here. We really appreciate public comments. Are there any other comments from the public? Okay, hearing none, I wish you everyone safe travels going home, and thank you very much, and I would look forward to a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Carolyn, did you get that? Commissioner Price and Commissioner Anselmi? All right. Thank you very much, everyone. Oh, yes, thank you. All in favor of adjourning, please say aye. Aye. And all those opposed, please say no.
I think on adjournment.